This bill has been tabled recently, so we want to make sure that we can hear from the maximum amount of chiefs. So we'll be going towards 2-minute speaking times. This is something we can do as chair, shorten the times during these types of sessions, just to make sure that we can get as much input from the chiefs who are present. We also, again, have our participants who are online. Just a reminder that if you do want to address the Assembly, you have to use the raise hand function, which is in the bottom of your selection thing. That's the way we'll be able to see if you want to speak here at the podium. A few other notes. We do have after that the presentation on the council reports, as well as the rest of the day, which will go towards resolutions. Final note before we get going, there is the National Chiefs Welcoming Reception this evening happening at the Starling Restaurant. It's for chiefs and proxies. You should have already received the invitation. So just to make sure that you remember, this evening there is the National Chiefs Welcoming Reception, and I will remind you again later. As people make their way over from their caucus rooms, we do know that most of you are watching the live stream. If you can join us in the Assembly room as we begin our plenary on the First Nations Clean Water Act. To help us introduce this topic, I would move it over to Regional Chief Brendan Mitchell. And just want to highlight and recognize your presence here after, like you said, 2 years not with us. It's good to have you back. Chief Mitchell.
Well, thank you, Cedric, and good afternoon, everyone. As Cedric said, I hope you had some lunch, because we want you to be having your bellies filled and be attentive as we talk about Bill C-37 and the water issue. Again, my name is Brendan Mitchell. I'm the portfolio holder for Housing and Infrastructure at the AFN, and I'm also co-chair of the Chiefs Committee on Housing and Infrastructure, a job I share with Chief Lance Heyman from Quebec. We've been having some conversations in recent times on Bill C-37. In fact, we had a session yesterday which provided a lot of conversations. I'd like to welcome our elders today, our chiefs, our proxies, members of the various committees and councils that we have. They typically sit right up here in front with us. I'm glad to see you back, and we're here. And I did get an opportunity yesterday to attend a little bit of the Youth Council's meeting, and it was nice to see the work that they're doing here. And it's our future. They're our next leaders in their own, not only in their own communities, but here at the AFN also. So it's good to have everybody here, and especially, the citizens. We have guest speakers here today also throughout the day. I would also like to mention and say thank you to our co-chairs, Adam Fiddler, Cedric Gray-Lahoe, and Kiara LeBeaube. They have a difficult job in keeping our meetings moving, but they do it with kindness and respect, and we really appreciate that very much. I'm pleased to be here today to speak to the importance of First Nations water legislation, and to do so on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. For decades, First Nations have advocated for water and wastewater legislation that actually meets our needs. Water is life, life is water. However, for many across our communities, access to clean water continues to be a tremendous struggle. And we're actually getting ready, I think, to go to war for water on behalf of our communities. As of today, there remain 38 long-term drinking water advisories, 28 of them in the Ontario region, a tremendous number of water issues in Ontario. And we have one community in this country that's been on a boil order for 30 years. Who has to go through that? It has a tremendous impact on communities in so many respects, in so many ways. For me, being from Newfoundland and Labrador, we have an abundance of clean water. I like to fish, fly fish. And I go to rivers and streams where I have no issue scooping up a cup of water and drinking it without fear of getting sick or contamination. We're very blessed. Occasionally, though, in our communities, we have a boil order, not that often. But to have a community on a boil order for 30 years, truthfully, unacceptable. And I think you can all agree with me on that. And there are First Nations who have experienced and continue to face evacuations due to lack of clean drinking water. First Nations in Assembly have passed nearly 39 water-related water resolutions over the past 15+ years. We know the issues and concerns. We need government to work with us on solutions, and we need them to do it in a hurry. We can't wait any longer for this bill to pass and get people in their communities having access to water, water they can drink, water they can wash their children, cook their food, would have to be concerned about the issues that inappropriate water will have on them and their families. The Auditor General confirmed this in October of 2025, finding that Canada has failed to provide the support necessary to ensure First Nations have ongoing access to safe drinking water. This plenary session is to discuss Bill C-37, the First Nations Clean Water Act, tabled by Canada in Parliament only on June 16, 2026. And I'll say this, the AFN was not part of developing this new bill, like we were with the previous bill, C-61, which died on the order paper in January of 2025. I have my own opinion on what happened to that thing. And sadly, we went through first reading, second reading, and then finally the third reading in preparation of bringing it to Senate. And we had Senator P.J. Paul Prosper, who was prepared, prompted, and ready to bring this to Senate. And this thing would have been done by now. But it never got to that stage. And I was hoping that we wouldn't have to start all over again to put a bill in place. Now we have to go to, I believe, first reading, second reading, third reading, Senate approval, finally before we get royal assent. I asked a question recently in a meeting to someone who was in the know about this. I said, when do you think we'll have this Clean Water Act finally in place? And they said, well, everything goes well. Hopefully we'll have it done before Christmas in 2027. Again, you know, it's a long time to be waiting to get this legislation passed. While the new legislation resembles the previous bill, First Nations from coast to coast to coast have identified critical areas of concerns and gaps that must be addressed through the parliamentary process. We must see new legislation that enshrines clean drinking water as a human right. It is an obligation for governments to honor that right for everyone, including First Nations. Following this plenary session, a resolution on First Nations Clean Water Act will be brought forward, seeking a renewed mandate that affirms key elements First Nations have long advocated for through past First Nations and Assembly resolutions, including Resolution 472023. I thank Chief Rod Gould, Jr. and Chief Lance Heyman, who sit on our AFN Chiefs Committee on Housing and Infrastructure, for moving and seconding the resolution. And I'm confident that when this resolution does get to the floor, it will be widely accepted and overwhelmingly accepted by everybody here. With the introduction of Bill C-37, Canada recently announced $4.6 billion over 5 years for the implementation of this legislation. And just previously to that, there was an announcement regarding roughly $1.4 billion. So that total, in round figures, comes to about $6 billion. But we're mindful that the cost of the infrastructure gap for water and wastewater infrastructure alone is currently estimated at $44 billion. So the $6 billion that we're talking about here represents about 15% of what we believe to be the requirement for closing the infrastructure gap on water for First Nations in this country. We need to be concerned about the health and welfare of our people. And too many people in our communities, our children, our families, our elderly people, have been waiting too long for water legislation that will help improve their lives. Hopefully keep their children at home. We talked yesterday in a meeting about the numbers of young people that find conditions in their communities not that great. And what do? They move out of our communities into larger centers where they think the grass is greener. And unfortunately, it's not always that way. And they find themselves in serious trouble there, homeless, living in encampments sometimes, and just not doing well and getting involved in some pretty hazardous activities. So we need to have situations in our communities that keep our young people at home. And water is an important piece of all of that. I would like to thank our invited guests who are here to share their perspectives on Bill C-37, including Grand Council Chief Linda Devassier, Anishinaabe Nation, Chief Billy Moran, Conservative Shadow Minister for Indigenous Services, Leah Gazan, NDP Critic for Indigenous Affairs, and Jeanette Levac, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services. I extend my gratitude to the Chiefs and all in attendance today for your attention to this important, very important plenary session. I turn the meeting now over to Cedric Gray-Laho. Thank you, everyone. Walalio.
Ottawa Regional Chief. So as mentioned, we have 4 speakers with us today. We'll be giving them about 5 minutes each to address the Assembly, after which we'll go into a sort of questions and answers discussion period. So you will have time as chiefs and proxies here to address our panel. We'll be going, as we have done, microphone 1, 2, online. Don't forget to raise your hand if you are online as well, and we'll maybe do a few cycles of that depending on how many questions we get, just to make sure we can get as much input as we can from the chiefs and proxies in attendance. To start us off, I would look to our furthest speaker away from me, Leah Gazan, who's the NDP critic for Indigenous Affairs.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad that this podium is not bigger than I am. I'm pretty short. So good to join all of you today. Just before I begin, I just want to make you aware that these are available for distribution at the distribution table, and it's a legal overview of the Bill C-37 legislation. Because I'm concerned about this legislation. I see it as another attempt by the Carney Liberal government to erode Indigenous rights while trying to disguise it as progress, a rapid erosion of Indigenous rights that's been affirmed by Amnesty International of the current Carney government. Because we know without clean water, there's no health, there's no dignity, no sovereignty, no future. Access to clean water is not a privilege to be handed out by governments. It is a fundamental human right protected under international law and confirmed in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, particularly Article 25, which confirms the right of Indigenous peoples to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditionally owned or used lands, territories, waters, and coastal seas, something the Liberal government, an article that the Liberal government conveniently left out in this legislation. And let us not forget that the only reason this bill exists is because First Nations were forced to sue the federal government for their failure to uphold the human right to ensure clean, safe drinking water on reserve. So, as was mentioned, even the historic announcement, court-ordered announcement by the Liberal government falls billions of dollars short of actually eradicating the crisis of contaminated waters in communities. And I'd like to add the federal government found $25 billion through debt financing to finance a sovereign wealth fund to line the pockets of corporations. Certainly they could have the same creativity to find the resources to end water boil advisories and the contamination of waters once and for all. There are several issues I want to point out. I thought I had 15 minutes, but I have 5. So I'm going to focus on some of the key issues that I outline in the legal brief that you help yourself at the distribution table. Bill C-37 denies First Nations the tools needed to guarantee safe water by limiting our jurisdiction to protect water sources to only on reserve. But as we know, waters does not stop at the reserve boundary, and in fact, some reserves have no water within the reserve boundary. Water flows, and it moves through watersheds across territories and through lands where a treaty and Aboriginal title exist. However, Bill C-7 does not respect Aboriginal treaty title or Aboriginal treaty lands by defining First Nations lands as, in quotes, and this comes directly from the bill, lands of a First Nations that are referred to in Class 24, Section 91 of the Constitution Act of 1867, and includes water and source water on, in, and under those lands. They do not include lands over which Aboriginal title is claimed by a First Nation or confirmed by the courts. This limitation obliges First Nations to negotiate with municipalities, provinces, territories, and the Government of Canada over source water protections outside of the reserve boundary. So are we going to see more crises like we've seen in Niskanjaga or Grassy Narrows or Attawapiskat, whose waters were contaminated as a result of industries that failed to protect the environment that was located outside of Indian Act reserve boundaries? Yes, we will. It is critical that we remind the government that treaty and Aboriginal title are protected under Section 35(1) and Section 35(3) of the Constitution and affirmed in UNDRIP. Our rights extend beyond the boundaries of a reserve and are connected to our lands, territories, waters, and resources. By excluding Aboriginal title and treaty lands, this legislation leaves First Nations responsible for the safety of our waters while denying us the inherent jurisdiction to protect the sources that sustain our communities. Just over a year ago, Bill C-5 was rushed through Parliament to legislate the fast-tracking of so-called projects of national interest while weakening environmental safeguards and overriding key protections, including the Fisheries Act, the Canadian Navigable Waters Act, the Migratory Birds Convention Act, the Canada Marine Act, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, the Canadian Shipping Act, the Impact Assessment Act, and the Species at Risk Act. Bill C-37 also ignores First Nations jurisdiction and weakens these environmental safeguards. This further jeopardizes the realization of safe, clean water and source water on First Nations and reinforces the reckless constitutional violations being perpetuated by the Carney government. Moreover, at this very moment, where the government is creating a pathway to accelerate projects that will affect Indigenous lands, waters, territories, and Aboriginal title lands, it is limiting First Nations jurisdiction over the very waters whose projects they may threaten. It is advancing development without the free, prior, and informed consent of First Nations, just like we have witnessed with the recent announcements of projects of national interest. I would like to remind the Prime Minister that the government's current approach does not satisfy the prior requirement of free, prior, and informed consent. International standards are clear that Indigenous peoples must be meaningfully consulted before major decisions, approvals, or designations are made. When the federal government unilaterally determines a project is in the national interest and only then initiates consultation, a foundational decision has already been imposed. This is not about whether you support development or not. This is about the Carney government upholding their constitutional duty to consult and accommodate. Consultation after the fact cannot be considered consent, just like we are witnessing with the newest water legislation, which was drafted with almost zero involvement by First Nations. Bill C-37 has also removed explicit recognition of the human right to safe water, something that First Nations across Canada fought for in Bill C-61, tabled in the last Parliament, replacing it with, in quotes, progressive realization of that human right. Lawyer Michael Rosenberg has commented that the use of this term, in quotes, has everything to do with being able to continue to fight First Nations in court and stand up and say, there is no right, we have no obligations. However, the right to clean water is not optional. The right to clean water is protected under Section 15(1) of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and is confirmed in international law. The failure of the Liberal government to uphold the human right to clean drinking water is a violation of the Canadian Constitution in addition to international conventions that we have signed on to. So when the Minister of Indigenous Services talks about progressive realization when it comes to First Nations' capacity to achieve the human right to clean drinking water, does that mean that nations who have been left impoverished while the Canadian government and big corporations get rich off our lands, territories and resources will have to patiently wait until they have capacity? I have no idea how the government stops exploiting. I have an idea for all of us. The federal government needs to stop exploiting our lands, territories and resources and give us our money back so we can invest in the infrastructure that we need to realize safe water once and for all. We are not the problem. Systemic racism and colonial violence is the problem. And I wonder whether the Liberal government would be so bold to tell the City of Winnipeg, Calgary or Ottawa that they were committed to progressively realize the human right to clean drinking water in the city. We must not accept this blatant racism and discrimination as normal. Which is why the section of Bill C-37 on substantive equality is so concerning when it only requires the government to ensure that First Nations rights to clean water and their access be, in quotes, comparable to that of non-Indigenous communities, end of quotes. The Canadian Charter guarantees rights and freedoms of all people, regardless of race, national or ethnic origin. We do not have a right comparable to clean water access. We have an equal right to clean water access. This article in Bill C-37 is full-blown discrimination by the Carney Liberal government, full stop. So we are in a dire place, my friends, and as somebody who was part of the I Don't Know More movement, where we marched from coast to coast to coast against Bill C-35, when they took out the Navigable Waters Act, you heard the list of environmental protections that the government is turning a blind eye to in this act. And with their stitched together majority government, it's very likely that they could fast-track this through Parliament, like we saw with Bill C-5 that happened just over a year ago. So I'm asking you, take a brochure, join the calls to action, because now is the time we have to stand together. Now is the time we have to act. We must defend our lands. We must defend our waters. We must defend our territories. We must defend our resources, not only for ourselves, chiefs and allies and friends, but for every generation yet to come, because water is life, and life is not negotiable or an either or our rights. Thank you very much.
Well, Leah, I'll be looking towards Chief Billy Morin, Conservative Shadow Minister for Indigenous Services Canada.
Nigan naskama mamo tawemo simantu noskagi sagak natoki topi nitsinetane ku nitsiga sun maskeg siochi tanse oki ogemawak kehteak nuwaku maganak. Sacred Rider is my name. It's actually a Blackfoot name. I always ran to Chief from Ghana today. And I always acknowledge that. That's my first name. And Billy Morin, the official shadow critic for the Conservative Party of Canada for the Indigenous Services Ministry itself. I want to acknowledge Chief Mitchell for that great opening. It's good to see you again, Chief, a friend of mine. My fellow panelists in particular, Leah Gazan, who just spoke so passionately and who pushes us in the House of Commons. Jeanette Levac, who I just want to acknowledge is probably under the most pressure today to speak, but it's positive pressure, and I know Jeanette's a good public servant, and she means very, very well when it comes to this discussion. And of course, Chief DeBossier, who's been a champion of this file for so long, and of course, our hearts go out to you, Chief, for your communities back home who will need water to overcome the challenges they're facing literally at this moment. And the other people I want to acknowledge in the room is the people who also need water the most. You know, being a first-time member of Parliament, Mikisew came into my office and they talked about cancer downstream from the Athabasca oil sands. Kiseshewan leadership, young leader, just came up to me here before coming up to the panel and gave me an update on their situation, of course. Niskanjaga, 30 years. Can you, I'm 39. Can you guys picture yourself as 30 years old? When you were 30 years old, some of you ain't even there yet, and just never having to go to the tap and worry. That's what they live with every day. My own home, Treaty 6, some of the chiefs there have spoken about what many of you chiefs go through of the overcrowding with families of 10-plus people in one-bedroom houses experiencing this thing. The Manitoba nations in northern Manitoba who are experiencing hep outbreak in their nations, just unbelievable in Canada in 2026 that this is a thing. And many other nations, but in particular, of course, Northern Ontario, Northern Manitoba, for some reason there's this cluster of First Nations, Niskanjaga being the most prominent amongst others of this area. For whatever reason, I promise as a member of Parliament to figure this out for that area in particular. But that area is just, for whatever reason, I'd say hit the hardest across this country when you look at a map. And those are the people that I have in my thought process when being a member of Parliament and the official opposition to challenge the government to do better. You know, my biggest criticism of the government being a first-term member of Parliament is that in the last 11 years, there's been a lot of good words. The word progression is used. But my reflection over the last year is there's a lot of words that are used, but there's not a lot of action to follow it up. You know, we've challenged them on Bill S2. They've said they want to get rid of the second-generation cutoff. But their words don't match their actions. You know, the first thing we did when I became a member of Parliament was study policing. They said they were going to make policing essential 3 or 4 years ago. They've completely walked that back. Now they're saying they fight tooth and nail for child family services in court still to this day, and those court cases are still ongoing. They say they want to consult on things like S2, but they don't consult on C5, or they don't consult on other bills. And on this bill, they didn't consult on this. This is the overwhelming message we heard from AFN, blatantly from the national chief, and from our regional chief just here today. One of his first statements is, we were not consulted on this, but they choose to consult on extinction bills like getting rid of the second-generation cutoff. So, you know, what this government says and what it does are vastly different things, and it is my responsibility as the official opposition to hold them to account. And I take great pride in doing that. I would say positive pressure to my respectful counterpart here in the Liberal Party, but pressure nonetheless to do the right thing by our people and our kids and our families. You know, the shortcomings of this bill are obvious. We've heard them in the headlines. We've heard them in the discussion of C61 leading up. And of course, the obvious one is walking back the human right to legislation. You know, I've engaged with non-Indigenous peoples in the last couple of weeks since this was engaged, and I've asked them, just as a test case, would you ever, like, as a Canadian, a non-Indigenous Canadian, is water a human right? Every single Canadian says yes. And on this legislation, that has been completely walked back by this government. Only because in court it seems that much way. They can explain it to you, but it seems that because of court cases ongoing, their actions again do not match what their words say. You know, this bill talks about best efforts. Well, best efforts are going to lead to Niskanjaga going to another 30 years of facing this, going to lead another 30 years of housing and families facing these different challenges. That's probably my biggest personal critical aspect of bills and legislation coming from the government. They had a deadline to get rid of all boil water advisories within 6 years. Well, that was 6 or 5 years ago, and there's no end in sight to this. And so I don't know what this legislation does actually to get rid of those last remaining things and keep that ongoing. This is a lot of fluff, in my opinion, and not a lot of action, and not a lot of getting things done for the communities themselves. They do have a political will to do other things, as my counterpart from the NDP said, but this, a basic Maslow hierarchy of needs, which was copied from the Blackfoot people, again, we're still discussing this today. This should be one of the #1, if not the #1 issue for our families and our communities. A lot of this bill still relies upon the power of the minister. They can claim self-determination, they can claim jurisdiction, but as my counterpart mentioned, if you read the text of the bill, this power still lies in the minister's office at the end of the day. So I cannot say that they claim jurisdiction in this bill as well. Of course, things are very easy, I think, to point out the deficiencies in this bill. I always say, let's not let progress get in the way of perfection. There will be no perfect legislation ever from any democracy, let alone the Canadian one. But at the end of the day, what I need your help with, chiefs, people in the audience, is to be a good opposition member, to be a good member of Parliament on behalf of our people, and that is to help me be your voice in committee, in the House, and to come and bring me solutions to this bill to challenge the government to be better. I probably will hear from my counterpart and the Liberals saying we are willing to open our ears to this, but we need to hear from you and the communities, the elders, the youth, Niskanjaga, everybody, you've been there 2 times, 3 times, 30 years worth of this stuff, and we still got to keep the fight going. And I really look forward to engaging communities more directly on this to make this bill even stronger, because it's not just enough for the official opposition of the Conservative Party to say this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. We actually got to come with solutions, and that I take great pride in, but through your voices as chiefs and as families and as people who need water as just human beings in this country of Turtle Island. And so, you know, for me, I look forward to your solutions. I look forward to the discussion today. And this is Canadian legislation. I'll wrap up here. This is Canadian legislation. Canada will exist. Canada is a country. I know we can debate that all day long, but Canada is going to be here for quite some time. But I'm also, myself, a member of Parliament, but I'm also Cree, Blackfoot. My kids are Dene. And I come from treaty territories, and what we say in treaty territories is as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow, we have inherent rights to define and protect our water. And despite whatever any legislation says, I will always back up the chiefs and the communities to protect that right and to do whatever we have to protect our communities in the face of anything that happens in that House of Commons. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussions. I can ask Gumtanwa.
So we'll all in again to Chief Billy Morin. I said Morin tantôt like a Québécois, so that was the other half. I now look toward Jeanette Lavac, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Bonjour. Hello.
Bonjour.
Thank you for welcoming me to your assembly here on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Merci de m'accueillir aujourd'hui.
Thank you for having me here today.
My name is Jeanette Lavac, and I am the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada, Mandy Galmasti. I am also the Member of Parliament for Saint-Boniface-Saint-Vital in Manitoba on Treaty 1 territory. It's a privilege to join you to discuss a critical piece of legislation, Bill C-37, the proposed First Nations Clean Water Act. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize my fellow panelists, Grand Chief Linda Bossier, MP Billy Morin, MP Leah Gazan, and thank you also to our moderator, Cedric, and Regional Chief Brendan Mitchell. Grand Chief, good to see you. As Minister Galmasti has often said, this legislation is about a simple but fundamental reality. Children should be able to drink safely from the tap. Families should be able to trust the water in their homes. And every First Nation should have the opportunity to build a safe and sustainable future. Since 2015, working alongside First Nations, the federal government has lifted 156 long-term drinking water advisories and prevented another 334 short-term advisories from becoming long-term. Ensemble, nous avons éliminé tous les avis à long terme.
We've eliminated all of these long-term in Quebec, in Alberta, in the British Columbia, and in the Atlantic provinces.
Meaningful achievements, but they're more than statistics. These represent families, communities, and children whose daily lives have changed for the better. We have seen that progress across the country. In Star Blanket Cree Nation, a 17-year drinking water advisory came to an end with the opening of a new state-of-the-art treatment plant. Earlier this year, Barons River First Nation in my home province of Manitoba lifted its long-term drinking water advisory after completing important upgrades. And just a few weeks ago, Okinese First Nation in Saskatchewan reached the same important milestone. These successes reflect determination, local leadership, and strong partnerships. They also remind us that lasting progress requires more than infrastructure. It requires reliable funding, skilled operators, strong governance, and an ongoing commitment to working together. Today, 36 First Nations remain under a long-term drinking water advisory. And frankly, that's 36 too many. That's why our work is not finished. Bill C-37 is intended to help prevent future advisories while creating a stronger foundation for safe drinking water for generations to come. For many years, First Nations have called for enforceable protections that reflect their rights, their priorities, and their lived realities. This legislation is the result of more than 6 years of engagement and dialogue with First Nations. I want to sincerely thank everyone who shared their knowledge, their expertise, and their perspective in helping shape this bill. And the conversation's not over. The legislative process is now underway itself, and that's an important part of the engagement. Parliamentary study, committee hearings, and continued dialogue with First Nations all provide opportunities to strengthen this legislation. First Nations participation throughout this process is essential to ensure the final legislation reflects their priorities and delivers meaningful change. At its core, Bill C-37 recognizes First Nations' inherent right to govern the water on, in, and under their lands. It would establish minimum standards for drinking water and wastewater, strengthen source water protection, and clearly define the responsibilities of the federal government, not only today, but for future governments as well. Today, First Nations do not have the same legal protection for drinking water as other communities in Canada. We know this. That's simply unacceptable. Bill C-37 is designed to help close that gap by establishing consistent minimum standards while recognizing that First Nations can build upon those standards through their own laws, governance, and priorities. This legislation also places First Nations at the center of implementation through the creation of a First Nations-led Water Commission, while strengthening the federal government's accountability for meeting its obligations. Of course, legislation alone is not enough. Some communities need new or upgraded treatment systems. Others already have infrastructure in place, but continue to face operational challenges. Whether that is recruiting and retaining certified water operators or maintaining aging equipment, ensuring stable long-term funding to keep systems operating safely every day. That's why our government is pairing this legislation with the largest investment ever made in First Nations water infrastructure, nearly $7 billion over 5 years. Ces investissements comprennent 2,3.
These investments contain $2.3 billion, including $6 million announced by Minister Gumasi.
Structure, operations and maintenance, and the skilled operators who keep water systems running safely every day. Just as importantly, Bill C-37 commits Canada to co-developing a long-term funding framework with First Nations based on the principle of substantive equality. That matters because communities need more than one-time investments. They need funding that's predictable, sustainable, and responsive to their needs for the long term. Bill C-37 recognizes that every First Nation is different. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, it provides a stronger legislative foundation while respecting First Nations rights, supporting community-led solutions, and helping ensure that drinking water advisories are not only lifted, but prevented in the future. We've made significant progress, but we also recognize there's still important work ahead. Bill C-37 represents another step on that journey. It combines stronger legal protection, affirms First Nations' inherent right to self-determination, and historic investments to help build lasting community-led solutions. As this legislation moves through Parliament, Minister Gulmasti, Indigenous Services, and I remain committed to listening, engaging, and working alongside First Nations every step of the way. Because lasting legislation is built through partnership, and the voices, your voices, of the First Nations will continue to be critical as Parliament completes its work. Merci. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you.
We will now be moving to our final speaker. And just as a reminder, again, we do have time for discussion after this. So if ever you do want, we'll have microphone 1, 2, and our online partners also. So it's now my pleasure to present Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council Chief, Lenin Nepasage.
Miigwech, Bojo Kanawea, Wase Abendago, Adik Dodem, Chiging Donji, Anishinaabe Kwendao. I listen sometimes to our members of Parliament and the various perspectives they bring At one time in my life, very early on, I thought, what party do I belong to? Am I an NDP? Am I an independent? Am I conservative? And I ultimately decided that I am an Anishinaabe. My name is Linda DeBosque, and I'm the Grand Council Chief for Anishinaabe Nation. I'm also the portfolio holder for Chiefs Committee on Housing and Infrastructure with Chiefs of Ontario, and I sit at the Chiefs Committee on Housing and Infrastructure at the Assembly of First Nation, along with the Environment Committee as well. I've had a long history in advocating for our water throughout many years. I had the opportunity in the last several years to sit alongside former National Chief Phil Fontaine to help co-develop a legislation for our nations grounded in our nation's inherent rights and ultimately their right to water. Bill C-37 was reintroduced very recently in the last few weeks, and as we heard from our parliamentary secretary speaker, there is this buzz, I think, coming from government encouraging us to say this is okay, this is acceptable, and you know, this is something that can be worked on, and then we are told time and again, well, there is a parliamentary process. We encourage you to come and, you know, input briefs and come and speak at committee. Well, ultimately, what we saw in the last round in C-61, any recommendations to make that legislation stronger were ultimately rejected by the governing party. So as we start to consider what's been, again, imposed on our nations, I believe that there is some context I need to share with all of you for thoughtful consideration and perhaps a foreboding of what's yet to come, not just in the area of water. To recall, the previous government was a minority government. As a minority government, they set their legislative priorities. This government was forced into the repeal of the previous water legislation for First Nations and were ordered by a federal court to introduce new legislation that reflected the success of the First Nations Water Settlement Agreement and those communities who championed that file. To give some context, the last action on the former Bill C-61 was on December 2nd, 2024. The House of Commons rose on December 17th, 2024. They had 2 weeks to pass the bill before prorogation of Parliament if they wanted to make it a priority. In addition to that, C-61 was introduced on December 11th, 2023 as a first reading. Second reading occurred June 5th, 2024. It went to committee following that, and from June to November, we had all of these committee meetings because we need to do all this consultation. And a committee report was presented with amendments December 2nd. Again, amendments that didn't include the ones that were proposed through that process that were ultimately rejected by members of that committee, including First Nations members. That's the truth. We move on to the prorogation of government. We see governments or parties blaming each other for this not happening. And at the end of the day, our nations again are in the middle of this fiasco. I look at communities like Saskatchewan, Niskandiga, even communities on Manitoulin Island that while their advisories are lifted, they were their community was in a state that could not provide clean, safe drinking water. One of our largest communities in this country, Pikangikum, requires $1.3 billion to have clean, safe drinking water. And some of the things that are happening in the last several months since the settlement agreement was agreed to, Canada starts to tell us, well, they have no money. I think that's a foreboding to Canada not adhering or obeying court orders, adhering to the rule of law, and continuing to bulldoze our rights for their gain. I want to acknowledge Shamattawa First Nation and St. Teresa Point for their successful litigation and a decision made back in December where the court found that Canada owes a unique legally enforceable fiduciary duty to First Nations in relation to on-reserve housing and access to potable water. What's interesting is that this government tabled C-37 2 weeks after filing their appeal to the federal court against Shamattawa First Nation and St. Teresa Point. Yet we're told here today to trust them, and this is what we're doing for you. And they're talking out both sides of their mouth. These are real actions that are happening. And we can't look at C-37 in a small box. We have to look how water flows, never in a box. And what else does it touch? I believe in hindsight that C-37 was introduced purposely after that decision by Justice Favel in that court action. I believe they delayed the introduction to determine what was going to be the language in that decision. And as a result of it, the language in C-37, the wording was changed to allow Canada to continue to fight Shamattawa and St. Teresa Point in the court. It is clear that the wording was changed to support Canada's argument. And we were the victims of a political game of wait and see what the court says, then we'll do our next steps. While we're waiting, hearing from the Prime Minister last December that legislation would be introduced in the spring. The truth is C-61 was ready to be reintroduced immediately after this government was elected, and it wasn't. So as mentioned last December, Justice Favel ruled that First Nations have an unmistakably Indigenous interest in safe drinking water on reserve, an interest over which Canada has assumed control, triggering a duty to act with communities' best interests, meaning their fiduciary obligation. However, Canada says that the judge went far beyond any existing legal obligation and paves the way for unlimited government liability. I agree with that, because when did any of our First Nations, any of our ancestors cede title to any water across this country? When did we surrender our jurisdiction over water? So we're dealing with an entity that has assumed control and exclusive jurisdiction to which different pieces of legislation impact many of our brothers and sisters, for example, in Alberta. In this appeal, the federal lawyers deny that First Nations have a distinctly Indigenous interest in drinking water, asserting First Nations' interest in their own reserve land because water is not attached to land but flows under and around the reserves. Clearly, every single lawyer in the Department of Justice in this country failed science.
The Justice Department argues that Canada supports water services in First Nations as an optional policy decision and not out of legal duty. And there you have it, folks, the watered-down version of the former Bill C-61 to continue to play into the government's ultimate plan of continued extinguishment of our rights, a continued erosion and an assault on our people. This whole topic of water is absolutely important to me. I think it's important to all of us. As a grandmother, as a mother, as a woman, we carry that responsibility. And I hope that the rest of our women feel the same. And I do hope that our men will stand with us, stand to support us, and help us carry this. I know there's been some talk about the key weaknesses of Bill C-37, and there are many. And this, I believe, has been articulated in the resolution that the leadership will be considering this afternoon. So I don't want to touch too much on that, and a lot has been said in the media by Chiefs of Ontario, by Anishinaabe Nation, by many nations across this country, and of course by our National Chief and our Executive. However, I want to turn your attention, as I mentioned earlier in my conversation here, is the distraction that government is doing to all of us. While we are focused on Bill C-37, I want to bring your attention to other things that are happening, like the modernization of the Canada Water Act, an act that was created without the consultation of First Nation, based on stolen water rights and a presumed jurisdiction over water. There's a national water security strategy that's happening as well. There's also a national freshwater data strategy. All continuing on very quickly, and in my view, and I'm not a lawyer, to continuously not only erode and extinguish our rights, but to put a full-on assault to support the thievery by government. And I'm not going to focus on a conservative or a liberal. The government is the government on what is rightfully and what rightfully belongs to our nations, and to pave the way for this economic development growth across this country. We see, and I've seen in the last several months, this government treating our nations as a special interest group and not rights holders. And why I say that, they continuously pass legislation, for example, C5 with lightning speed, C9 without even thinking about consulting with our nations. Every bill that's been passed, they pick and choose if First Nations are consulted. And they want to continue to move things fast through this upcoming First Nations major projects legislation that we will likely see go at the speed of C5, and with little to no consultation with First Nations, because they want to put us in the Iskan-Cernak box. The reality is that our rights are all across government. We have worked very hard, and I think the previous government worked very hard in reconciliation. I believe that there have been some very good things that have come out of it, only to enter into 2026 to have that chapter fully closed and a new book created. I believe that this fall there will be some very serious considerations that our nations have to do in unity and collectivity to really ensure that
we don't allow this government to continue to displace ourselves amongst each other, to conquer and divide, because that's where we're weakest. We hear nice language, but I encourage you all to really look at text of every single piece of legislation that gets put forward. And I also challenge you all to really think about what strategy are we going to deploy. We don't have an opportunity to have a conversation amongst each other in these spaces while we're being, recorded on CPAC and, surrounded by government officials. We don't have that opportunity to really strategize as to what we need to do together and to work to achieve consensus, to build back our nations and not to continue to allow for separation, for that division. Our great-great-great-grandchildren depend on it. I became chief when I was 33 years old, and I had so much hope and optimism. I'm 44 today, and I've at best lost hope with dealing with governments, but I have not lost hope in what we can do together.
Hear, hear.
I have not lost hope that collectively we can see through this veil of deceit, of manipulation of language and words. And I believe that we can become stronger than we've ever been before to stop allowing for the erosion of our rights through legislation. So I just want to say, Chimigwech, I believe in our leadership. I believe that we're all led by our ancestors, and we all believe in our responsibility, our inherent responsibility to Creator for the gifts that Creator gave to us, for now, tomorrow, and into our future generations. Miigwech.
Thank you, graduate.
There's nothing more impactful than a matriarch who's talking in such a poised way. God, I adore you. Like we said, we'll have a bit of time for questions and discussion. We're going to cut it to 2 minutes. This is one of the things we can't do when we're outside of resolutions as chairs. Again, just to remind you, we do have 2 resolutions that are upcoming on the subject of water, so there will be space for discussion at that point too. And I just want to take the time to highlight also the fact that next to the stage, we do have the water that was with the water walk yesterday. And just having that presence among us as we work on this, I think, is very important. I'll start with microphone number 1, and if we can have that 2-minute timer, please.
My name is Tyson Wesley, and my chief, Hosea Wesley, sends his regards. Today, he decided to go be with the family of an individual who have just recently passed away at 146 today. But the story that my community is here to tell everybody is we've been evacuated for 6, and by the time that our infrastructure is repaired, it's going to be 7 months. The reason why I want to remember the young man that just passed away, we've lost 9 people, and he's going to be the 10th one today that we've lost. And we've lost 10 people because of water infrastructure. Our people got sick because of the failure of this government, and I'm here to tell you how many more people's lives have to die until we do something and until we tell the government to provide what they promised us. I want to give time to my counselor here for him to speak to. Miigwech.
Wat Claudius Kusis is Nekazen from Kassetchung Cree First Nation. I don't know where's my community anymore. You know, we've been evacuated back in January 8. You know, we lost lives. 9 or 10 lives now. It's very difficult for Quechetran First Nation. Even my chief, Jose Wesley, he had to turn back last night to go with his family. At 1:47, he texted me just a while ago. His nephew passed in Niagara Falls. That's 10 sold, 10 lives. Maybe we don't know where our people is. Some of them, they're Kapuskasing, Corcoran, Timmins, Kingston, in Niagara Falls. They're all scattered in Ontario. When the government going to wake up? Back in November, I saw the minister walking behind that table. And he said, I'm going to lift water treatment plant for the First Nations. Where is he? Where is he? Where is it? Enough. It's enough. Pesado man, iwan niya kano danihan. Munastanin sa agwelo mo niya miyan niya si Meschet Nanok. For my people. I want to take my people back. I wanted to. They're still working in my community. We don't know when. My people want to go back. Getting frustrated. Last time I spoke, I'm stand beside my chief. Stand for Quechetran Cree. Let's put water treatment plant a proper way. No more Banjay solutions. No more. Don't forget, Quechetran Cree needs help.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
We're going APTN. Watch it.
Just a quick reminder before we go to our next speaker, we also do have the wellness room, which is available in room 107. We understand that some of these topics can be difficult, impact our families every day, so if ever you do need, there are people in room 107, so on the first floor, available. Microphone number 2, please.
Kelsey Jacko, Cold Lake First Nations. I'm here today because water is life for our people, and it is our spirit. Who live off the land, water is a sacred, inherent, and unceded treaty right. It is a direct obligation signed between our ancestors and the Crown. Yet looking at Bill C-37, it is clear that Canada has forgotten who holds the sovereign right to these waters. This piece of legislation was not co-developed with us. If it was fast-tracked, it represents a massive step backwards from previous drafts, and we will not stand by while our inherent jurisdiction is battered away behind closed doors. Let us be entirely honest about why Bill C-37 is so weak. The previous draft included explicit mandates to protect source waters, But the moment the Alberta provincial government sends a letter complaining about resource development, you strip your ministries, you strip those protections out. Cold Lake First Nation sits in the heart of the heavy oil, SAG-D and air weapons range. Water does not stop flowing at the invisible boundary line of the reserve. By limiting our jurisdiction strictly to reserve plots and forcing us into a voluntary trilateral partnership with a provincial government that openly uses its Sovereignty Act to hostilely oppose federal environment rules, you have left out waters entirely unprotected. The Minister, what happens when Alberta refuses to cooperate? You have given us a fantasy, not a framework. You cannot give up the protection of water for money because our people cannot drink money. Furthermore, let's address the talking points. Your department boosts about $4.6 million funds, but the Assembly of First Nations has laid out it takes $44 billion to close the gap on reserve infrastructure. So how much is it going to really come to my reserve when it's all broken down? Your historic funding covers less than 20% of what is actually needed to fix and safely operate our systems over the long term. Worse yet is the hypocrisy while you stand before the cameras presenting this bill as a gift of reconciliation. Your Department of Justice lawyers are just fighting First Nations in court. They're actively arguing that Canada has no legal duty to provide safe drinking water on reserve. You have changed the absolute human right to water into a policy of progressive realization, just to legally shield your government from liability. Cold Lake First Nations demands that this committee stop fast-tracking a flawed bill. Go back to the drawing board, reinsert mandatory resource water protections that override provincial industry interests. Fund the infrastructure gap fully. Honor the Crown to Nation treaty relationship. We do not accept delegated authorities or watered down rights. We demand true water sovereignty. Masi.
Thank you, Chief Jacko. I'll be closing the speakers list now. So those who are here, I'll go back to microphone number 1. And again, we do not have anyone online. So microphone number 1, please.
Yeah, Chief Sonny Batiste. I'm just going to pass my time over to this Jocelyn Wabino.
I can't reach the. Can somebody pull this down? That's good then. Okay, can we restart the time?
Yeah, please reset the timer.
Gagashehaw den dagos of nation hason maskona totem. And then oyo square nina. At obskata humagashe sipik nochi. Mechanakis konina mechanakiski nochi. My spirit name is the one who behaves elderly. I'm from the Bear clan. I'm Inano through my mother from Attawapasket. I'm Eo through my father from Chisasibi. I'm a Turtle Islander citizen of Turtle Island. And I'm also known as Jocelyn Wabino Ayatel. When my mother passed, when Mary Lou Wabino Ayatel passed, I had the coroner's office investigate my mother's death. I asked them to treat my mother's body like a crime scene, and I had to do things that we don't traditionally do. And I requested a forensic autopsy. They came back and they said that the ovarian cancer, the colon cancer, the breast cancers that my mother had are a direct result from the carcinogens that were found in our water, our land, and our air. This is a woman that received the Indian Residential School apology along with my grandmother in the House of Commons. And we keep saying that water is life, and that water poisoned her. And we've been poisoned intergenerationally. We have health issues, cancer, poisoned through every organ of our bodies in many different forms. And today I ask everyone here, if you think of this as a genocide, a crime against humanity, war crimes, and a crime of aggression, if you believe what's been done to my mother and my community members, please stand up if you believe that this is what's happening. want to say non-insured health benefits is cutting back. We're regressing in the apology and the truth and reconciliation. And there is no place for that. We can't continue the way things are going. We need authentic love. We need authentic resolution. We're human beings. When I say inano, when I say iyo, it means I'm a human being. You know, and we're suffering intergenerationally. And when I come up here, people will often say, "You're so passionate, Jocelyn." We're talking about people that I love. And the Canadian state doesn't care about us. What's changed? What has changed? Where is their ability to love? Because that's what it comes down to. And so again, just like I did in last December's meeting, I'm asking for all our chiefs to get together. Let's get the genocide trial started, because that genocide is happening in many, many different forms, right through intergenerational child warfare, genocide, the water contamination, the missing and murdered, and I can go on and on and on. So please, that we gathered together for this genocide trial. Much gratitude.
I would turn it over to microphone number 2, please.
Miigwech, Shining Turtle, Sturgeon Clan. I want to talk about two things. First, a message from Chief Patty Peters of Biganjigaming. He sends this message: the need in the community is about 1.5 billion, and if you look at the rate of inflation, would probably round that off to about 2 billion in a far remote community. So they would need 2/7 of the amount that's being offered. Their history goes back over 30 years, and nobody's listening. He sends this message. He says there's no more light at the end of that tunnel. I just got off the phone with him. He said, "Can you send that message? There's absolutely no more light." We talked about this word. It's called political armor, and unfortunately, we all live this political armor. It's when governments, including ours, protect themselves. So that's all I heard here was protecting yourselves from blame or delays, legal risk, instead of just trying to fix the problems. It slows down decision making. It shifts the blame. So the federal, provincial, and territorial governments, contractors shift the blame back to the bands, and I see that. I live that experience. It favors appearance. How about this one? This political armor favors appearance over actual infrastructure development. Creates short-term fixes. Pekanjigam's dealing with boil water. So they're having water brought in, and it's costing about $1 million a month. 700 of that goes to contractors. The rest is water. The sad reality that they're living right now. It makes funding harder. So when I sit down with the federal government, it's just getting harder and harder. And how many people have seen that experience with government? When you're sitting down with this, it just gets harder and harder, and it's all the armor. And I wish the government would just tell them to put it down. Like, we just got to put that stuff aside. And people's lives, and you've heard this so articulately here this morning or today, that people's lives are actually at stake.
If you can go towards closing.
For northern communities, it's just going to make things much more difficult and much more harder. Construction costs, transportation costs, systems, shorter winter seasons for winter haul. So at the end of the day, the political armor just gets in the way of processes. And the processes, unfortunately for all of us, they become so more important than the outcomes. And that's just a sad reality that we face. Maybe if we put down the political armor, we can actually get something done. Miigwech.
Take your microphone too. Microphone.
Okay, bonjour. Uzo gitende magaik nishnabek migach denendano gitan bangi nishkandaga noji nino gemakan Gary Kuzis Niznikas. So I thank you all for coming here to come and listen with our meeting to address our issues. I just want to talk about the water. Our neighbors, brothers and sisters, Kasachwan, that are displaced. I'm on the same shoes as them. I got 31 years of boil water advisory. We went through with 5 prime ministers. Imagine, 5 prime ministers. What kind of work did they did in 5 years? And this C-37 is just another act, another policy that's trying to protect the government on their wrongdoings. So when is the water going to be fixed? It's going to be lifted. Every campaign I hear that there's boil water advisories that are lifted. For sure not in my area. I don't know which country you guys are talking about. We have lives that we lost within the 31 years. And there's a lot of trauma. You know, it started when residential schools era. That trauma is never cured. It's piling up within our lives. Our water is 31 years. We've been denied two PARs already. How many more lives are going to be lost with this water infrastructure? We didn't put it there. It's the government that put it. Same thing with the health system. It's not our problem. It's the government's problem. They're running around like chicken with no heads, you know, trying to fix the issue. It has to be better, way better. This is a new millennium. Everybody should have a clean drinking water. Get rid of that old policy. So me amigos.
Oh. More speakers. If I can go to microphone number 2.
Good afternoon. My name is Norma Large. I'm from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation, but I'm here today as proxy for Chief Rupert Manine from Tall Cree Tribal Government in Treaty 8 in the Alberta region. As you may or may not know, the chiefs in Treaty 6, 7, and 8 have established a treaty bilateral table on water and related infrastructure. The terms of reference were signed December 2025, and shortly thereafter a commitment for a new bill was put on the table. A commitment was made to the chiefs, and this is a question that I have for our friend from ISK. A commitment was made to the chiefs at a table where both chiefs, all the chiefs from the committee and the ministers committed to providing the bill before it was tabled in the House of Commons. That didn't happen. And in fact, as Grand Chief Dabasi has said, that the bill was not provided to just about anybody, but we're told was given to the Ontario region 1 week prior. So what we have here is a difficulty, and what I would call a difficulty with good faith and honor of the Crown. Now, I would like to know, as a technician to this work, how do you reconcile building a treaty bilateral table, which would be Treaty 6, 7, and 8, a bilateral table, and then making a position, as the Department of Justice did, which says that there is no duty to provide clean drinking water on any First Nation, And secondly, on the question of related infrastructure, that you're touting a whole whack load of money, but the issues are so thick. Before you even get to a table like what we have, it puts on the table good faith. Now, I also have a question for you, Chief Morin. I know that it has been said that the Conservatives have an alternative plan around monetizing infrastructure. How do you reconcile monetizing infrastructure funding with the position that water is life? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number one, please.
Great, Deluisna Isaiah Bernard. I want to pass my time to my friend Ramon.
Wache, my name's Ramon Katakwapit. I come from Matawabscut First Nation. I'm a part of the Eagle Clan. I'm a youth council member for Anishinaabe Nation and Chiefs of Ontario, but I'm also the founder of a youth movement called Okinawak. And I really enjoyed your words, Linda. It's a good fight. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up here is, where's that fire in everyone? In Ontario, a dangerous bill had passed last year, Bill 5, that threatens to fast-track development without having to go through regulatory processes that keep our environment safe and our cultural and our safe spaces. And especially the water. The water stands to be affected the most from a bill like Bill 5 or Bill C5. And yet, I've seen the fire die down from my leadership from the past year, yet we still kept it going. Right now, with my group, I have two co-founders in Geneva, Switzerland, speaking on behalf of Turtle Island, on behalf of our group at the expert mechanisms on the rights of Indigenous people, about the dangers that these bills are bringing and what Canada is doing by not following their fiduciary duty to uphold the things agreed upon within our treaty, but also an obligation that they have to their Constitution. But how can we fight Canada or Ontario with them fast-tracking things in the name of the dollar if we're still within the same system? I find that my leadership for many decades have put off the hard question of what it means of withdrawing from the Indian Act and having something to replace it that is made from Indigenous people themselves, like an Indigenous-led Constitution. And unfortunately, our Constitution has to be put on paper, but our Constitution is the ground that we stand on, the water that we protect, the air that we breathe, the sun that we feel. That's our Constitution. That's something that everyone in here knows inherently through their blood memory, but yet we're still trying to conform to the ways of the Mistagosho, the ways of the white, the ways of the government, the modern world. And even here at AFN, it's just another mirror and a reflection. And I see you waving me down, so that's it. But keep that fire going, and we'll keep fighting for the water.
Thank you. My name is David Morias. I'm a chief of the nation for Pemicha, Quebec, and I'm speaking on that from that point of view as a sovereign nation. But I'm also a chief for the cross-state band of Indians as an ex-officio chief. So today, I wanted to say that, I guess to the members of government and all the panel that's up there, like I'm speaking on behalf of Pemicha and Mackinac people regarding Bill C-37 and the First Nations Clean Water Act. Our message is very clear. Water is not just a service issue. Water is life. Water is a treaty right, a constitutional right, and a human right, and a responsibility to future First Nations, especially the children. Some key concerns that we have with, is that it limits First Nations water jurisdiction to reserve boundaries only. From where I come from, my territory extends beyond the reserve boundaries. It's only a rubber stamp, a stamp on my territory. Our rights and our responsibilities do not end at the reserve lines created by the Indian Act. Our waters and our territories and responsibilities extend throughout our traditional lands. Bimitsingmak knows the consequence of losing control over our waters. Canada, Manitoba, and Manitoba Hydro altered our rivers and waterways through hydro development. The Churchill Diversion and Lake Winnipeg regulations damage our lands, waters, traditional livelihoods, and a way of life. These impacts were recognized through the Northern Flood Agreement, which Canada signed. Canada cannot separate itself from these impacts. Canada approved and authorized these projects. Canada is responsible to uphold the Northern Flood Agreement and its constitutional obligations. Canada cannot allow Manitoba and Manitoba Hydro to avoid accountability. Our rights are protected. Section 35 of the Constitution 1982 recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights. UNTRIP recognized Indigenous peoples' relationship and responsibilities to their lands, waters, and territories and the resources that live within them. Water protection must include source waters, ecosystems, culture, and future generations. Our concerns with Bill C-37, the right to clean water must be recognized as a human right, a treaty right, not something delayed through progressive realization. First Nations must have real authority over water decisions. Consultation is not enough. Canada must recognize Indigenous jurisdiction and decision-making authority.
If you could start wrapping
For us, I don't know what my time is. I'm going to finish off 10 minutes. Would we say amend Bill C-37 to recognize the First Nations water jurisdictions beyond reserve boundaries, recognize clean water as an enforceable human right, respect treaty rights, Aboriginal title and Indigenous laws, and fully implement our Northern Flood Agreement, and hold Canada, Manitoba, and Manitoba Hydro accountable for the destruction and impacts caused to all our waters all across Canada. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Chief. Then we have the speakers list, Chief Miracle, so we'll be going to our final speaker, I believe, on microphone number 1.
My name is Gajitsago Selin Gabriel. I'm Turtle Clan from the community of Kanasadage. Saturday was 36 years anniversary of the war that was Canada ignited against Indigenous peoples. And I want to talk about something that is not included in this bill, which is those of us who have aquifers. We use well water. If Canada had good environmental laws, we wouldn't have to worry about our waters. If Canada respected our rights to water, our rights to a clean and healthy environment, we would not be in this predicament. It is Indigenous customary law, our laws, that precede and dominate Canada's laws. Your laws have proven that you do not care about Indigenous people. Your laws have created this problem, from everything from denial of our rights, our human rights, to the denial of water to the people who really need it. Water is life, as people have said. What happened in my community is a toxic waste dump, an old uranium mine that wants to get reopened again. And because we can't do anything because of the lawlessness in our community, that Canada knows exactly what is going on, that we are being punished for ruining the reputation of Canada 36 years ago, that we have to worry about everything from water to our own safety. So all the words that you have said, that you pat yourself on the back about doing for Indigenous people, is empty words. Where is the actions behind your words? Where are the actions for your international human rights obligations that you should have been doing generations ago? This is Okwahua land. All of Canada is Okwahua land. It does not belong to Canada. And I thank you for being here. And I thank you. And Canada should have the patience that Indigenous peoples have had for centuries, and not fast-track everything for becoming the 51st state of the United States. So thank you. Skana. Ito.
And our final speaker, microphone 1, please.
Yeah, Gail Kessler, Chief Rick Johnson, Quixote First Nation. Just wanted to give opposition to Bill 37 and Bill 5. Phil Fontaine came to our reserve in 1998, I believe, and we had a tremendous drinking problem back then, and that problem still exists today. You know, we get bottled water flowing in at a tremendous cost, a tremendous cost to our health. It's got arsenic, it's got everything in it that's making our people sick. And, you know, I just wanted to come up and voice that along with the other nations. This has to stop. It just has to stop. Gail Kisla.
Thank you, thank you. Again, I close the speakers list, so we will be going towards our closing for this plenary session. I'd like to thank Grand Council Chief Linda de Passage. I'd like to thank Chief Billy Morin, Leah Gazan, and Jeanette Lavac for being with us today. With time, we won't be going into a response period, but again, I do believe you can make yourselves available for the chiefs who are here. So again, thank you everyone for your panel. We have a few tokens of our appreciation for your time, so I would look towards our regional chief. So as our panelists are leaving the stage, I'd look towards our next session, which is the plenary session on government consultation on streamlining major projects. And again, if there is more discussion to be had on water, there are 2 resolutions that will be coming to the floor.
In closing this plenary, I just want to say thank you to everybody here for your words. We felt your thoughts, your emotions, and what you had to say about this Bill C-37 is important. We heard similar conversations yesterday also in the plenary session we had on Bill C-37. This is a tough one. In our session yesterday, one of the gentlemen said, a chief said to us, instead of us having to swallow Bill C-37, why don't we create our own Clean Water Act as a First Nations group and get the Government of Canada to swallow that? That's a different way of thinking about the way things are doing. Instead of somebody writing down what we should be doing, maybe we should be talking more. And I know the National Chief clearly hears what people had to say about Bill 37. Our Chiefs Committee also. This fight isn't over yet, you know, and we are sort of in a fight here, aren't we? Kind of at war. And we need Canada to be far more supportive of our communities and our people. And to hear stories today about people dying, 10 in one community related to water or water contamination, that's very disappointing and discouraging. And my heart goes out to people in our communities who still suffer with water situations. So we're going to work on this as an Assembly First Nations group, and we'll try to do what we can, and we will do what we can to make this a better situation going forward. Everybody seemed to like the content of Bill C-61. We've got to get the content of Bill 61 back into whatever form of Bill C-37 we have. So again, thank you very much for your time and your attention today, and to our speakers, thank you again. And while I'm up in a second, I would like to say this. On behalf of our Executive Committee, I'd like to say thank you to the Assembly First Nations staff. Having an event like this is never easy. It's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, but our staff make it accommodating, and they're efficient in their work, and we really appreciate what they do here. So thank you all. Have a great remainder of your day, and we look forward to the next 2 days of conversation here at the AFN Assembly. Thank you very much. Walalio.
Thank you, Regional Chief. So again, I would look towards our next 2 speakers. We will have with us Drew Lafont from MLT Atkins, as well as Chief Lance Heyman from Quebec First Nation, to be talking about the work that's being done on upholding and honoring the duty to consult and upholding environmental protections. We'll be having our first presentation by Drew Lafont. We'll have about 15 minutes of presenting, then we'll go on to a presentation by Chief Lance Heyman, and after which, again, we'll go back to the floor to speak.
Good afternoon. Danse kakio. Kinana skuptenua. Drulafon and Sigasun. Maskego Sigagana Kotinia. Hello to everybody here today, and thank you for the invitation to speak and address the Assembly. My name is Drew Lafond. I'm a member of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation and Treaty 6 territory. I'm also descendant to the Simp Nation or the Secwepemc Nation in British Columbia. And I'm here today in my capacity as a lawyer with the law firm MLC Aikens. MLC Aikens advises the Assembly of First Nations' National Chief's Office on matters related to certain government proposals and government initiatives. So today I'm here to address the Assembly because the federal government has proposed a series of legislative, regulatory and policy reforms that are aimed at accelerating approvals for major projects in Canada. They've asked for the AFN's input on these important proposals, and that's why I'm here today. I'll preface my comments with, as legal counsel, we're taught from the earliest days in law school that it doesn't matter how complex or how complicated or how conflicting or contradictory a fact pattern might be. You always approach a problem by going back to your first principles, to the initial principles that you learn on the first week of law school about the importance of policy, the importance of good faith, the primacy of the Constitution. There are other important principles that we incorporate into our roles as Indigenous lawyers, and that's respecting natural law, respecting the law of the lands, and respecting our traditional and customary government authorities. So it struck me when I initially reviewed the proposals that I think it was my obligation to advise the Assembly based on a similar approach, and that approach that I've been employing since I started as a lawyer. And in this case, the legislative proposals that have been put forward by the Government of Canada are sweeping in nature. They're extraordinarily complex, and they are we haven't seen a concrete version or a concrete statement from the government on what this will look like. However, when we eventually do receive those proposed legislative reforms and details on the implementation, they're going to be extensive. So when faced with an issue like this, my view on that is that we continue to look back to the government to try to remind them that when approaching problems like this, the legal issue is to go back to the first principles. And the first principles in this case are Section 35 of the Constitution Act, the protection and the recognition of Aboriginal and treaty rights across Canada, the right of free, prior and informed consent, and that's set out as a principle in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but also incorporated into federal law under the UNDRIPA Act federally. So I'll preface again my comments with the Assembly hasn't yet engaged directly with the ministers on these proposals. The Assembly hasn't been given direction on the strategic response. So what I'm sharing today are my preliminary observations. The bottom line is, whatever the government proposes, it still has to comply with Section 35 of the Constitution Act, with FPIC under UNDRIP, and that's not a suggestion to the Assembly here, that's the law. I'll start by getting into the timelines that were introduced and some of the frustrations that that gives rise to for the Assembly. The timeline that we have been given, even with the extension of July the 22nd, in my view, remains woefully inadequate relative to the breadth and the complexity of the proposed major reforms. Timeline is always going to be a struggle. We're all faced with scarcity when it comes to resources. However, in this particular case, they're rushing major reforms, and the ability of the Assembly to respond to them in the timeline allotted is impractical and unworkable. But getting into some of the proposals. The first and the second one, Canada proposes that the federal impact assessments and permit reviews be completed within 1 year, with both of those processes running concurrently rather than sequentially. So at the outset, I will acknowledge that there are some frustrations when it comes to impact assessments, and the government has a legitimate interest in ensuring the acceleration of certain major projects. It's notable that under the current impact assessment regime, which was introduced in 2019, amended in 2024, there have only been a handful of decision statements that have been issued by the minister. Typical impact assessments go on for longer than 4 or 5 years. For certain projects, particularly where there's First Nation consent, free, prior, and informed consent that's been obtained in advance, those timelines for a major project, I think, are completely unreasonable and not conducive to a healthy investment environment. But that said, nation-to-nation consultation with First Nations, I think, in my view, is an equally important, if not superior, policy requirement and a legal requirement. So a fixed timeline has to always be reconciled with the Crown's obligations under Section 35, under UNDRIP, and under the Supreme Court of Canada's decision in Haida. And the question is whether a legislated 1-year cap can preserve meaningful consultation, or whether that will create pressure to truncate the engagement processes. Next, the government is proposing to conduct permit reviews concurrently with impact assessments, and that this raises, from the AFN standpoint, some practical sequencing concerns. Sequencing matters when it comes to environmental assessments, impact assessments, project reviews, and regulatory certificates and licenses and authorizations. The simple question is, if permit reviews proceed before the impact assessment is complete, will the permits be developed or issued without full consideration of First Nations perspectives, Indigenous knowledge, cumulative effects, and mitigation measures? First Nations fought extraordinarily hard for the inclusion of concepts such as Indigenous knowledge and the use of traditional land use studies to be incorporated within impact assessments. Those were incorporated into the impact assessment framework back in 2019. Those are being essentially set aside or circumvented in favor of a process that's more streamlined and more accelerated. The next is Canada's proposing a Crown consultation hub within the Impact Assessment Agency to create one coordinated process per major project, essentially a one-stop shop. Before spending too much time on this one, I'd just like to bear that there's a striking resemblance between what's being proposed here and the Alberta Aboriginal Consultation Office model that's being used in Alberta currently. That is a model that a lot of the First Nations in that province have held is inconsistent with free, prior, and informed consent, with the duty to consult and accommodate in the honour of the Crown. Currently, the Miksuk Cree and the Athabasca Chippewa First Nations are challenging that regime in the Alberta Court of King's Bench, and the outcome of that action has yet to be finalized. However, it bears mentioning at this point that there are some key concerns with that central hub model. The main one, obviously, is that the central hub does not have the ability or is not issuing any decisions itself. It is merely making recommendations to the regulatory agency or the body that has that decision-making authority. That's a problem because the consultation is being carried out at arm's length from the body that's the ultimate decision maker, and the ability to challenge or scrutinize the proceedings of a hub or an office are very limited at law. What we don't want to see is that process replicated at the federal level. Next, Canada is proposing a single federal decision document that's going to be issued by the Minister of the Environment. It'll include all federal decisions required for a project to move forward. And for Canada Energy Regulator regulated projects such as pipelines, transmission lines, offshore renewable energy, a separate impact assessment under the Impact Assessment Act would no longer be required. And this goes back to my earlier comments. In some circumstances, the impact assessment agency's process will not be a part of a project review. Projects will be able to go forward before the Canada Energy Regulator without an impact assessment. I'll pause at this moment. Again, the Impact Assessment Act is not perfect. It was reviewed before the Supreme Court of Canada in the reference re-impact assessment, and Canada did strike down provisions in the initial 2019 version. So it's far from perfect. It does have some challenges, but at the same time, it has an important function. It secures sustainability, it addresses cumulative effects, it incorporates Indigenous knowledge and impacts on First Nations. If those protections don't show up somewhere else, then what we have on our hands is a legislative gap that isn't being addressed. Next, what's being proposed is federal economic zones that cover transportation corridors, telecommunications, energy production and transmission in industrial regions. Developments within these designated zones will be pre-approved subject to conditions. Again, this bears a striking resemblance to the special economic zones, the regional zones that were introduced in Ontario under Bill 5 last year. And the Assembly, I know, has a number of issues with that and the process that it's creating that essentially circumvents deep and meaningful consultation for impacted First Nations. The fundamental question is whether zone-related or zone-level engagement can substitute for project-specific, free, prior, and informed consent, or whether each individual project still requires its own consultation and consent process. There's a separate suite of proposals from Transport Canada addressing trade corridors, port governance, and regulatory reporting. These can't be addressed or assessed in isolation. Corridors will carry what the projects produce, and the ports are the terminus for corridor development. So to conclude my comments today, I'll remind everyone that we don't know exactly what's in the legislation or what the legislation will look like when it's introduced, but based on what we've seen, the approach seems to be accelerate approvals first, determine consultation frameworks later. It's Parliament's role to ensure that major project reforms respect the legal requirements in Section 35 of the Constitution Act and UNDRIP. And I think that's where the Assembly needs to focus its attention as the legislative process unfolds. It's Parliament's job to make sure that these major project reforms actually respect our laws as First Nations, constitutional principles, and international human rights legislation. Thank you very much for your time.
Our next speaker is the Chief of Quebec First Nation, Lance Heyman. You have the presentation, right?
Yes, I do. Okay. So just the red, green button.
Green button will go forward. Yeah.
Sorry. Is good? Right. Okay. So, Kwe, bonjour, good afternoon. Want to begin by thanking the Elder for the opening prayer this morning. It's always great to start our business off in a good way. Also want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation, and very proud that our nation always opens up our space so that you folks can come here and we can conduct our business. I'm hoping in the next 15 minutes to be able to demonstrate clearly how dangerous the acceleration of projects without appropriate consultation and C5 and the 4 discussion papers that the Government of Canada have out, how they are going to directly impact us in a very negative way. My name is Lance Heyman. I'm chief of the Kebawek First Nation, an Algonquin community about 4 hours north of here. We spent the last 11 years, fighting the development of a nuclear waste dump alongside of the Ottawa River. So the purpose of the plenary session today is to discuss how the Crown may honour the duty to consult and uphold environmental protections in the context of where governments are streamlining major projects through law reforms that are designed to expedite and deregulate industrial development. For Kebawek, we are no longer talking about how the Crown may honour the duty to consult, but how it may uphold the right to free, prior and informed consent, standard contained in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which should be the floor for Crown conduct. The rights in UNDRIP are the minimum standards for the survival, dignity and well-being of Indigenous people. AFN Resolution number 28, Protecting FPIC in Federal Major Project and Regulatory Reform, moved by the Chippewas of Nawash First Nation, reflects Kebawek's approach in this file. There's a serious risk that the expedition and deregulation of major projects will lead to violations of FPIC and Indigenous laws about resource use and development. My goal in delivering this presentation today is to show how Kebawek is exercising its sovereignty and demanding an equal right to decision-making through the development and implementation of our own rights and responsibilities assessment law, which is being applied for the first time to the proposed near-surface disposal facility. My presentation today will cover 4 quick areas: our federal court landmark decision in Kebawek versus Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, the development of our precedent-setting law, free, prior and informed consent, triggering the application of our rights and responsibilities law, and the risks that the Crown legislative reforms and streamlining and expediting major projects will have on our rights entitled in our territories. This decision is currently under appeal. The case was heard by the Federal Court of Appeal in the fall of 2025, and we are awaiting their judgment. We had a second court case. It would dealt with the issuing of a permit by ECCC for the destruction of habitat that was critical for species at risk. We won the court case. We also won an appeal a couple of weeks ago. So now they have to go back to the CNSC for a redetermination of the process because they didn't follow the rules. Following our federal court victory in February of 2025, our nation undertook community engagement with the view of developing an FPIC protocol. We held many community meetings, focus groups and surveys to develop a law that reflected our membership and our priorities and values. And we couldn't do this alone. There are great legal advisors and groups out there who are ready and willing to assist First Nations in taking charge of their own affairs. So I need to give a shout out to Bruce MacGyver and the First People's Law, who are instrumental in taking the time and dedicating it with my people so that we could develop our own law and process. In November 2025, we ratified our law after months of hard work. It reflects an exercise of our inherent lawmaking authority and jurisdiction. I heard Ellen Gabriel speak earlier and said that our laws trump those of the province and the federal government, and we believe that as well. So we've gone through the process of developing our own laws because we believe that our laws supersede those of the government. The law provides for a community-based assessment committee that assesses projects in accordance with Algonquin law. Sorry, I lost my spot. And acknowledgement provides recommendations to councils about whether or not projects should be approved or not approved or approved with conditions. The law flips the script and puts Kebawek in the driver's seat. It's no longer us responding to the Crown's request for a consultation on 30-day timelines, but expecting both proponents and the Crown to submit project descriptions and follow our FPIC process whenever they propose activities in our territory that could adversely affect our rights or impact our sacred responsibilities to Mother Earth and all our relations, and in particular, the protection of water. The rights and thank you. The rights and responsibility assessment laws is triggered not only by physical projects like the near-surface disposal facility, but also for legislative proposals advanced by the Crown, like C5. There's also 4 discussion papers that are currently, out for our review, and graciously we've got an extension to be able to provide comments by July 22nd, but it's really incumbent upon us all to make sure that we speak our mind in regards to what's happening. Legislative proposals include the enactment of new laws or regulations, or the amendment or repeal of existing laws and regulations, which could adversely affect or impact Kebawek's rights and responsibilities. The Crown often takes the position that the duty to consult does not apply to Parliament when enacting legislation, but this does not exempt Cabinet or the executive branch's obligation to consult and obtain the consent of First Nations where it advances strategic level proposals that could result in expansive impacts to Indigenous rights. Article 19 of UNDRIP requires that the state to obtain the consent of Indigenous people where it proposes legislative or administrative measures that may affect us. This is a standard that is not being met in relation to C5. We can all remember that, it was basically railroaded in a week and became law. Where I am. Okay. This
triggering an activation of law.
I think we did it, eh?
That's where you do that, right?
Okay.
There's the big green button to go for.
Okay. Bill C5 and related proposals will result in drastic impacts to First Nations' abilities to exercise and maintain our stewardship responsibilities to the land, waters, and animals as it promotes deregulation. KFN is communicating with all federal and provincial regulatory authorities that it expects the Crown to follow and adhere to our rights and responsibilities law if it wishes to receive our consent for projects. The Federal UNDRIP Act is still law in Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada has found that it has been incorporated into Canada's domestic positive law. Canada cannot evade UNDRIP and FPIC when advancing major projects, and Kebawek expects to be treated as a sovereign nation over projects that have been identified on our territory. Kebawek strongly opposes the proposal to transfer existing nuclear impact assessments from the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Our remarks and position also reflect our unique position on this issue. Kebawek has direct and ongoing experience with projects that remain subject to predecessor federal environmental assessment regimes and nuclear regulatory processes that are overseen by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. The discussion paper appears to assume that the Impact Assessment Agency and Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, as federal IA authorities are interchangeable. They are not. The IIAC has a long history of administering a comprehensive impact assessment framework supported by legislation, regulations, publicly available guidance, policy documents, advisory bodies, Indigenous advisory mechanisms, public registries, and established procedural safeguards. These tools create certainty, transparency, consistency, and accountability for all participants. Our experience with the CNSC-led review, including environmental assessments that they are reviewing under CIA 2012 and the nuclear licensing regime set out in the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, demonstrates significant gaps in procedure and safeguards for our rights and that of the environment. What's more, CNSC lacks the transparency mechanisms that increase accessibility of impact assessments. For instance, the Impact Assessment Registry provides a public record of correspondence, submissions, information requests, studies, and decision-making materials. No matter the nation or communities, everyone is provided equal access and can see the concerns that are raised about a particular project, be they from Indigenous nations, experts, or the general public. No such equivalent registry exists before the CNSC, and for projects where they could choose to post project documents to the registry, they choose not to. The Crown should not respond to concerns regarding efficiency by weakening the already poor approach the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission has demonstrated on environmental assessments, where it is the federal review authority. No justification has been provided to support the transfer of existing or future nuclear impact assessments from the IAAC and CNSC, and we reiterate that impact assessments should stay with the Impact Assessment of Canada. The second risk, and that's another one of the discussion papers in and around the federal economic zones. There's a proposal to establish federal economic zones through national regional assessments fundamentally misunderstands the purpose of a regional assessment. Regional assessments are a tool to improve project-level decision-making by providing a broader understanding of cumulative effects, ecological limits, Indigenous knowledge, regional priorities, and long-term sustainable considerations. They were intended to strengthen future impact assessments, not replace them. Creating FEZs through legislation is equally concerning. Unlike ordinary project approvals, legislated FEZs create an ongoing indefinite threat. Indigenous nations are left uncertain as to when such powers may be exercised, what projects may ultimately be captured, and which regulatory requirement may be removed. KBAWEC is especially concerned that FEZ may be used to exempt projects on federal lands from review. Among the largest and most significant federal land holdings in Canada are federally owned nuclear sites owned by Atomic Energy of Canada and operated by Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, including the Chalk River Laboratory site, which is in the heart of the Algonquin Territory. We fear that the government could use FEZs as a tool to evade Indigenous expectations for FPIC by simply designating the federal nuclear lands as federal economic zones. Our requests are summarized as follows. The Crown should not respond to concerns regarding efficiency by weakening the already poor approach the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission has demonstrated on environmental assessments where it is the lead federal authority. No justification has been provided to support the transfer of existing or future nuclear impact assessments from the Impact Assessment Agency to Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. KFN reiterates that impact assessments ought to remain overseen by the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. The Crown clearly and unequivocally confirms that FEZ will never be used to reduce, eliminate, or circumvent obligations owed to Indigenous nations, including consultation obligations, impact assessment requirements, regulatory oversight, or mechanisms for Indigenous participation and consent. Absent such assurances, KBAWEC submits that FEZs risk becoming tools through which the Indigenous rights can be sidelined in the name of short-term economic development. The problem we see, quite frankly, with Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, they're supposed to be the regulator. They're supposed to be the eyes and ears and the protector of, the environment. The CNSC has never turned down a nuclear project, good or bad. Thank you for listening to me, Chimigwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Jihan. So again, we have about 10 minutes to discuss, and again, we'll go to microphone number 1, please.
Bonjour, Mishkwab, Ndijnikas, Makwan and Dodem, Anishinaabe and Dow. Really good to see you, Lance and Drew. Miigwech for the presentation. I'm here to speak against the acceleration of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, Deep Geological Repository, and IGNAS. For the past 4 years as chief, I've fought really hard to try to stop this from happening. It appears more and more likely that the Deep Geological Repository for Nuclear Waste is coming to Treaty 3. And I'm really worried about that. I'm asking for the national chief, the regional chiefs, as well as the Assembly of First Nations to demand that Canada not use the Build Canada Act to accelerate this project. If nuclear waste is truly coming to Treaty 3, then all impacted First Nations across Treaty 3, Treaty 9, Treaty 5, across the highway transportation corridors need to be consulted and fully accommodated. The reality is that we're being pit against each other. I read recently about the Williams Treaty First Nations investing into a small modular reactor. And when I heard that, I asked where the nuclear waste would be deposited, and their consultants said the NWMO Deep Geological Repository. And that makes that SMR project our enemy. We're fighting for the treaty rights, for the way of life, for our water, for our future generations. And at the very least, we deserve a say. So again, I ask all of our communities, all of our leaders to stand together. We're being experimented on. I heard a young person, I'll close with this, I heard a young person back home said they used residential schools to experiment on us. And with this nuclear waste deep geological repository, they're experimenting again on us again. It's never been done in the world, but they're forcing it down our throats. I just ask us as First Nations to try to stand together united that at least we deserve a voice in this project. Miigwech.
Thank you. Just as before we go on to our next speaker, I just want to remind those online, if you do want to address the Assembly, you have to use the raise hand function. That's the only way that we as chairs can see you. So just as a quick reminder, if ever you do need help, we do have a few technicians there to help and support you. If we can go to microphone number 1.
Okay, bonjour, Chief Gaziz from Niskandaga First Nation. I just want to thank the presenters. It's good to hear that somebody's working on trying to protect our culture. So, like for the community of Niskandaga, there's large watershed in our area. We have a river that flows through to Arwabskat. And we have a great livelihood from all nations that use the water. Sturgeon is one of the species that's really protected, and it's one of the aging species we have in our country. And with these major projects that are coming in without no consent about First Nations culture, we're losing our language rapidly. We're losing our culture rapidly. We still practice our livelihood. We use the land. We use the God's given gift. what Anishinaabe was to use to live off from the land, to heal from the land. You know, there's all the gift that was given to us is going to be destroyed. Half of our country is destroyed already. Nobody talks about the climate change that's happening. You know, the climate change is really impacting our lives. You know, it's not getting easier, but we need to stand together to protect our land. You know, that's our gift. Now it seems like it's just fading away because of the mighty dollar. We have unspoken people that live in the wilderness. There's the moose, there's the birds, there's the fish. We have to speak out for them. You know, and for our community, we go out every day to go eat fresh fish. You know, because we can't afford the high cost of living. You know, a liter of gas is $5 back home. You know, it's plus 31 years of boil water advisory. You know, people lose lives over that. Our health care is a failure. You know, drug epidemic. Where's the plan for that? You know, respecting First Nations to work when we're not healthy. How are we going to benefit? We have a big drug epidemic right across Canada, losing loved ones every day. Seems like almost every hour. And these are the things we should be discussing to protect our future generation. You know, we work so hard in our area to try to prevent from overdose. But where is the government on this? They're the ones that are providing drugs. It's not hard to figure out. That's why they don't do nothing. I think we need to be more vocal on our future. So, miigwech.
Thank you, Chief Creasy. Again, we do have a bit of time left, but I would turn towards our presenters. Drew, did you want to address the two comments that were made? Or Lance?
What I forgot to mention at the end of my presentation is that, you know, the work that we took, you know, to develop our own law, it was, you know, our people, you know, who did the heavy lifting. And because we have that law, it clearly, you know, lays out a process. And it's not a simple process. I mean, you know, to go from step 1 to 13 takes 905 days, but still, you know, faster than regular federal environmental assessments. And at the end of the day, we will have our say. But my point that I wanted to make is that, look, it took us, you know, an extensive amount of work to be able to do this law. But we're more than happy to share, give it to First Nations who want to develop their own and could potentially use the law that we developed, you know, as a guide to be able to do that, so you don't have to incur, you know, all the work and the expense that comes with taking, you know, a process from the ground floor and developing something that belongs to us. But at the end of the day, we're going to continue, you know, to fight. And we know that once the federal court rules in this case, whether we win or lose, we know that this case is going to the Supreme Court, because there's another case that has very similar in terms of what's happening, and that's the Gitsala in BC. And we know that there's a provincial and ours is a federal case. But there's absolutely a lot of similarities to what's going on. So in closing, as I had mentioned, you know, we're more than happy to share the work we've done. the law, my assessment committee would be more than happy to tell you the struggles that they've had in developing the law. And just so you're aware, our committee is made up of 7 people. It's made up of elders, it's made up of our youth, it's made up of our women, and everybody has a voice. And each of these individuals go out and solicit opinions from, our community members. At the end of the day, the law does not belong to me. It's my job to implement the law. The law was developed by and for our people in our community. And we will continue, to fight the good fight. Because as I mentioned earlier, I've had a great number of influences that have made me understand better what my role and responsibility is. And it's the water carriers that, come from our nation. And I look out at our Grand Chief, and every time I think about her singing the water song, I'm reminded of why I do this work and what our community members continually tell us and what you've all heard in the last 2 sessions. At the end of the day, we need to protect the water. Money's great, but money will not give us life when that water is gone. Chimigwich.
Thanks. I'd just like to respond to Chief Copenace's comment, because I think it was actually very prescient in what we're faced with right now. I had these comments when I was presenting at the Assembly with respect to Bill C-5 last year, and I'll echo them again, that I don't have the confidence that there is a united or a consensus-based position right now at the Assembly to be able to go and tackle these types of questions with a uniform approach. And that's very concerning to me, because I think like you had said, Chief, our First Nations being pitted against one another, and that's a big concern, and I think it's a tremendous risk of entering into these processes, of having First Nations who, within their own territories, are poised and prepared to capitalize on economic development in ways which will benefit their community entirely, and in cases where they have the tools in place to mitigate environmental impacts and monitor them and scrutinize them closely. I think that is one category of community that participates as a member in the Assembly, but there are a various number of other communities who either aren't in that position or who carry a very different ideological view. And to ensure that all of those views are respected is something that the AFN or the Assembly stands for. The Assembly has never been anti-economic development, but it's been economic development which has to yield to the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. And economic development that has to ensure that the principles or the laws of each First Nation are being respected. So I do caution against these types of grandiose initiatives by the federal government, because they will drive a wedge through our people, and I encourage members of the Assembly to build their own consensus, build their own bodies, work within your own laws and institutions. And I think that's a wise approach, and it's a prudent approach that was taken by the Chief here, which was build your own legal frameworks to govern economic development activities within your own traditional territories. So with that, I think that concludes everything I wanted to say today. Thank you to the Chief for inviting me, and thank you, National Chief, for the invitation.
We'll go to one final speaker. If I can have microphone number 2, please.
Don't say goodbye yet. You also have a legal due diligence to us as the chiefs and the leaders in the room. And what I mean by that is that I don't think we're giving all the right tools to make informed decisions as leaders. There's a legal due diligence on anybody that advising us to notify us that, and this is the coin I'm going to phrase, and I want it to stick somewhere somehow. Litigation is generational. That's the conversation we're going to be having right now. Litigation is generational. It's not absolute. It's not an end to all. It's not where we're going to get what we want when we go to litigation. We hear it in the room. We were speaking from the heart. We're speaking about our kids. We're speaking about our water, our territory, our people, our ancestors. Elders are at this mic crying. Those elders are going to be gone soon. So I want to challenge the idea that litigation is generational and it should be part of the conversation. What that means is that The Supreme Court ruling on the East Coast, Donald Marshall decision Jr., we won that case, thankfully, because it would have affected all tidal waters from Atlantic to BC and all tidal waters in between. But what's not talked about is the legal precedent set by a second reading of the Supreme Court reading. It went back. Why did it go back to the Supreme Court? And the terminology included in the legal reading was a moderate livelihood. Unprecedented. We think the Supreme Court is the absolute. We win our case. We're not given them the right tools to negotiate in a good, positive way if we don't have those core problems, conversations from legal and legal counsel and advice. That legal precedent was set, one, to appease public opinion, Joe Blow public, the Canadian public, but also the federal mandate to protect resource management across the country. That's why we got a second reading. And what I mean by intergenerational, that was 20-some years ago. The terminology for moderate livelihood hasn't been determined, hasn't been defined. And it's held over us in the Atlantic coast that, well, you defined it. It's not defined. So it's a legal loophole that just continuously stays there. When you talk about these national projects, if we don't have the conversation to say, we're being misled as leaders. What I mean by that is we have to negotiate to create opportunity, or it's going to be generational litigation that we're going to pass on to our grandkids. So I just think we have to be honest when we're talking about this and say that just because we may win, it may be appealed, it's not going to be us that'll be dealing with it, it'll be the next generation. So to have the true conversation, and one thing I'm liking is this, is have the tough conversation. And one resounding thing I'm hearing all day that I'm very happy is the word unity. If we unify and give the voice, a solid voice to the national chief who I support, go and represent me and the next generations. Don't allow it to be litigation for our next generations of people. Well,
thank you. I'll look towards our speakers. One last opportunity maybe to address. All good? So then thank you very much, Drew Lafont for MLT Atkins, as well as Chief Lance Heyman from Quebec First Nations. We do have a small token of appreciation as I will turn it over to our youth co-chair, Cara LeBeau.
We are going to move into the AFN Council reports. We will start with the Knowledge Keepers, followed by the Veterans Council, the 2SL LGBTQIA+, and the National Youth Council, and then the Women's Council. So we'll invite the Knowledge Keepers Council co-chairs, Dr. Gwen Point and Chuck Hume, to present their reports.
Thank you to everyone that's here and to our national chief, our regional chiefs, to our knowledge keepers, and to all the leaders that are here, both in-house and online, as well as to our AFN staff, as mentioned before, that makes this possible, takes care of us while we're here. My traditional name is Shashkawit. The language I speak is Halkmelim, and they call us Stolo people. That's a contemporary term for Stolo means river, but really I'm Staelis Skowlitz, married into the Chowik tribe. What it's known today as the Fraser Valley in British Columbia. And I have the co-chair, Chuck Hume, here, and we're going to divide up the report. I've been the chair now, I believe, for 5 years, co-chair for the Knowledge Keepers. And I know the senior chiefs and leaders understand our role, but I'm really proud today in the BC caucus to have one of our young women who was a student of mine, and she became chief this last year or so, and she's here. If she's in the room, can she stand up? Alicia Peters, Chief Alicia Peters. It really does warm my heart because it's the youth are following, the youth are doing what you're doing. And she mentioned a couple of our young chiefs as well that she looks up to. So we're doing something right when the youth begin to follow us. And it's more for the young people, younger leaders, to know that the Assembly of First Nation Knowledge Keepers Council is a vital council of the AFN as established in the AFN Charter. The Knowledge Keepers Council is an advisory body to the AFN chiefs, committees, the AFN Secretariat, and the AFN Executive Committee. And the Knowledge Keepers Council is made up of 3 knowledge keepers from each AFN affiliate across Canada, representing the male, female, and the 2 SLGBTQIA communities. And our role is to offer advice, assistance, support to our national chief, to the executive, to this First Nations and Assembly. And each of us have a portfolio that oversees the AFN sector. And my background is education, and I was with the AFN Education for a number of years, and then last year they switched us all up, and it was a real learning curve to get involved with lands and climate change. But it was also exciting to see we say ATIS, the good work that's being done, just highlight that. To highlight the good work that you're doing. Not that it's easy, I think we've heard a lot of that today, but that we're doing the work, that the work is being done. And it does, I can stand here and feel like our children have a better future, our grandchildren do, by virtue of what you're doing today. Before I introduce our council, I wanted to just take a moment of silence because our Saskatchewan representative, Joe Quincy's passed away. And if we could just take a moment of silence for him and his family, I'd appreciate that. To Ian, thank you. I remember when I was young, they said that when an elder passes away, that's a library. We just lost a library. So I encourage the young leaders here, especially the ones just starting, don't be backwards about visiting elder chiefs. Don't be backwards about bringing them a gift and just shadowing them, following them, learning from them. With that, I'd like our knowledge keepers to please stand. In the Yukon, of course, we have the co-chair Chuck Humes and Mary Jane Jim. If you want to wave your hand, Mary. British Columbia is myself and Harvey McLeod. Northwest Territories, we have Grace Blake and Felix Lockhart. Alberta, Ivy Rain and Lawrence Cortia. I owe you some money, Lawrence. And Manitoba, Mike Muswagon. Yeah. Ontario, Terry Fiddler and Barney Batiste. And Quebec and Labrador is Bill Sunday and Joe Lazor. New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, we have Alden Bernard. Alden. And Nova Scotia, we have Judy Clark and Barbara Sillyboy. And Newfoundland, we have Dr. Calvin White. And again, the KKC has re-engaged with our portfolios and has ensured that each AFN portfolio has an accompanying knowledge keeper to provide guidance. And the AFN continues to update the KKC on their portfolios here at the AGM and Special Chiefs Association. The Council continues to advocate for First Nations languages, traditions, and ceremonies, ensuring that they thrive as they are the foundation for creating and maintaining stronger nations. And I really believe that's why we can do what we do, simply because we have this strong connection to the Creator, to the Spirit. And the Council is essential to the AFN day-to-day activities to keep First Nations traditions, values, languages, and history in the fore. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my counterpart, Chuck.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Chuck Hume. I'm from the Yukon Territory, and I'm Tlingit ancestry through the Tla'aquan First Nations, and basically I come from the whale house. Ye hit, they call that in our language. And I think, you know, it's very important that we start creating what is talked about today, looking at our own laws. You know, put them into a text and show them to the government. This is what we stand by. You know, right now it's a little mixed feeling when I look at their laws. Their laws were made to put us, to spread us apart. And I think it's important when I realize that their laws generate a lot of hard feelings. It puts our people in jail. Our laws teach our people we have no jails. We look at our laws and we think, you know, this is the way our people lived, our forefathers lived. And they lived strong in that era. And the path ahead moving forward, the KKC will continue to provide support and guidance to the AFN Chiefs Committee, the AFN Secretariat, and the AFN Executive Committee, ensuring that all activities move forward in a good way. The KKC will continue to meet as required, including at the AFN General Assembly in Winnipeg, Manitoba in July 2025, and the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly in Ottawa, Ontario in December 2025. Activities, updating terms of reference. The KKC plans to update their terms of reference. The terms of reference will enable the Council to continue to provide assistance and support activities of the AFN Secretariat, AFN Executive Committee, Chiefs Committee, and Councils. Activity number 2, updating the Assembly of First Nations AFN Charter. The KKC will provide feedback to the Chiefs Committees on charter renewal as they work to update the AFN Charter. These updates will allow the Council to advance their work and continue to meet to review and update protocols, traditions, ceremonies, roles, and responsibilities. Activity number 3, aligning sector portfolios. The KKC assigned portfolios to each council member, ensuring that each AFN portfolio is supported by a knowledge keeper who provides necessary guidance and principles in sector meetings as needed. Activity number 4, information sharing, working alongside the First Nation Veterans Council. The KKC publishes and distributes the Council Flyer, a biannual newsletter designed to promote and share information about the Council's progress, activities, and achievements of the KKC to First Nation assemblies. I thank you very much, and especially to the chiefs that traveled a long ways, to the council members and the chiefs that are with the AFN. Thank you, Kunishish.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gwen and Chuck, for your report. We will now invite the Veterans Council co-chairs, Veteran Deb Eason and Tim Olone.
Ani bonjour, nanatime kusindejnakas, nomayanganawe nishnabekwe, Batwana. My name is Debbie Nephew Eisen, and I am a 36-year veteran with the Canadian Armed Forces. I am also a proud member of the Batchewana First Nation. And with that, I would like to acknowledge Chief Mark McCoy and the councillors from Batchewana, and also to acknowledge Regional Chief Andrea Paul. It's important that I acknowledge this because as veterans and as people who are active service members, when they leave their community, it's important for chiefs and community to stay connected to these veterans and to these active service members so that they maintain the grassroots and connection to the family so that they know that they are not forgotten in their communities. I retired from the Canadian Armed Forces as a Chief Petty Officer and now live in Jabuktuk, Halifax with my daughters, 5 grandchildren, and my husband Dave, who is also a veteran. Before we begin our report today, the Veterans Council would like to acknowledge the conversation this morning, reference to residential schools and the trauma associated with that. We also acknowledge that First Nations veterans not only attended residential schools, but when they volunteered to fight for Canada and the United States, some were enfranchised, which means their status was taken away, which also added to more trauma being put on top of that. My colleague and fellow veteran Tim Olone are here to provide the AFN Veterans Council report for 2025-26 on behalf of our chair, Percy Joe, who is not able to join us this year as his community in British Columbia is under standby evacuation due to fires. We will keep Percy Joe, his family, and his community in our prayers. Our role as the AFN Veterans Council is to be the liaison between First Nation veterans and Veterans Affairs. We are here to ensure that our veterans are treated with respect and dignity and are afforded the care after service that is every veteran's right and that every veteran deserves.
I'm going to introduce our council members. As noted, our chair is not here, Percy Joe. I'd like the council members to stand, please. My name is Tim Malone. I am the Northwest Territories rep on the council. I want to acknowledge our colleague from Yukon, Carl Sidney, from Alberta, Henry Rain, from Saskatchewan, Emile Highway, from Manitoba, Chief Lawrence Letendre, from Ontario, Wendy Jocko and Gerald McGregor. From New Brunswick, Eldon Bernard. And of course, my colleague Debbie, and representing Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland, Ken Bennett. Before we acknowledge him, I kind of would like all the other veterans that are in the room. Oh yes, Alan, so sorry. Our elder and pipe carrier from the East Coast and a Vietnam veteran. We'd like to also acknowledge, if you happen to be a veteran from your own community, we'd like you to stand as well. We want to acknowledge you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We want to note our friends at Veterans Affairs is here. If you have a veteran in your community, we'd like you to go to the table, get a card, and bring it to your veteran. Veterans Affairs has failed First Nations communities. It is trying to do a better job in reaching out to as many First Nations communities as well. And so we just would like to ask for you to go and get a card, deliver it to your veteran who may be struggling, whether they're a long-time serving member or just a recent veteran. We would like to have them the card in their hands so that if they struggle, they can reach out to Veterans Affairs. One of the things that we want to acknowledge is the fact that we've all signed a code of conduct. For those that were here last year, that code of conduct was broken. We had a very difficult discussion with our elder colleagues, and we see it as appropriate that the veterans as peacekeepers, we will need to stand up in what we call bystander intervention to ensure that everyone in the room is treated respectfully. You may have seen last year we needed to ensure that that those that broke the code of conduct be held accountable. So sadly, that is the role of the Veterans Council and as peacekeepers. I want to state that since October 2024, the AFN has been working with Veterans Affairs Family Wellbeing Fund aimed at fostering a strong relationship with that department. The proposal was approved, and First Nation Veterans Council began efforts to enhance collaboration with VAC and our council. The funding was granted for a 3-year period. Veterans Affairs does provide grants and contributions on a diverse range of organizations to conduct research and implement initiatives that support well-being of veterans and their families. Some of the key issues. As a result of the letter of understanding that was signed in 2023 and then renewed again in February 2025, the LOU was established as joint commitment between our council, the AFN and Veterans Affairs to work collaboratively in responding to veterans' needs. The 4 points to the letter of understanding is to assess and expand outreach activities for First Nation veterans and their families, establish a clear point of contact for First Nation veterans at Veterans Affairs, to increase Indigenous representation, in particular First Nation representation in commemoration-related activities, to support and establish of a historical record for First Nation veterans and soldiers who have served in times of war, military conflicts, and in peacetime. For those that may have some veterans veterans that have been overlooked, we suggest you go to the Veterans Affairs and provide names of those that have served in either war, military conflict, or in peace times. We're trying to expand that list, and we are now into the names of thousands. Since signing the LOU and the renewed approach, our Council on Veterans Affairs has had multiple meetings to discuss next steps, improvements to VAC services, and our Council's role in implementing the 4 key areas. VAC and our Council have continued to hold working group sessions to facilitate discussions. The LOU represents a second phase of ongoing efforts to strengthen collaboration. As part of the agreement with Veterans Affairs, we have provided quarterly reports to VAC to ensure progress in implementing the 4 pillars. We're going to close off with Deb.
The second phase of our LOU was signed in February of 25 in Vancouver, and this a strong relationship with Veterans Affairs Canada and the Assembly of First Nations Veterans Council. The renewed LOU aims to ensure the development of tangible outcomes and service delivery to address the needs of First Nations veterans, their families, and their communities. This LOU outlined 4 points, as Tim said. The first was outreach, which First Nation Veterans Council guidance and partnership. Veterans Affairs has attended and hosted info sessions at either powwows, drop-in sessions, and has shared a booth at our AGM and Special Chiefs Assemblies. In the commemoration outline, invitations were extended to Assembly First Nation Veterans Councils for selected delegates to attend international commemoration events, such as in June of 2024, it marked the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy in France, which was attended by veteran Al Knockwood. In November of 2024, veteran Jerry McGregor attended the commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the UN peacekeeping in Cyprus. And more recently, Newfoundland veteran Ken Bennett attended the 110th anniversary of the catastrophic Battle of the Beaumont Hamel, where 800+ Newfoundland Regiment soldiers were decimated in under 30 minutes. Since the signing of this LOU, the AFN has identified over 15,000 Indigenous individuals utilizing the reliable sources from the Library and Archives of Canada, the Canadian War Museum, and the Veterans Wall of Honor, and the Last Post Fund, which helps to place headstones on the graves of those veterans whose headstones are either missing or damaged. The Veterans Wellbeing Act states that recognize and fulfill the obligation of the people and the Government of Canada to show just and due appreciation to members and veterans for their service to Canada. This obligation includes providing services, assistance, and compensation to members and veterans who have been injured or who have died as a result of military service, and extends to their spouses or common law partners or survivors or orphans. First Nations veterans deserve this recognition, and they deserve fair and equitable access to Veterans Affairs Canada's programs and services.
Hear, hear.
In conclusion, I am very honored to be an Ogichi here and to have served 36 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. And on behalf of our entire AFN Veterans Council, even though he is not here, we would like to acknowledge and say Chimigwich to our chair, Percy Joe, for his service to Canada and his long and dedicated and unwavering commitment to ensuring all First Nations veterans receive the much-deserved care and support after their dedication and service to Canada. Chimigwich Walaliok, merci beaucoup, thank you.
Merci, Joe.
We will now invite the 2SL LGBTQIA+ Council Chair Dwayne Gaston Aucoin.
Thank you. Masiti to get you on ya Usatini. Whew. Got my loud potlatch voice. There we go. Gastant kakasnut fuhat was out klingenach goats na hat city and yedia hat. Glekayadika deshitan dat santa hat deslisen kwana hat. Atlang guchish hat yenadi. Thank you, everybody. Good to see all of you here today. I'm doing Gaston Okwa. I'm the Yukon rep on the 2S LGBTQIA Plus Council. I'm also honored to be the chair of this amazing family. I'm from the Yukon, and I'm from Teslin. I'm an inland Tlingit. No, I'm not a chain smoker. That's all the smoke in the air right now, but I'm going to do my best to get through this. I also wanted to acknowledge the Chiefs in Assembly for moving the time to today, to right now, so we could address the Chiefs in Assembly. It's much appreciated for doing that for us, because we do important work on your behalf, and we come across from all parts of the country to do this work. So it's an honor for us to be able to share with you as well today. I also wanted to thank our regional chief, Wendell LeBeau, who does work with the murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit. So works also with the Women's Council. It's been amazing to have you work with us. I also wanted to acknowledge our staff. There's been some changes within AFN, so the staff that I've moved to different areas. We had Natasha, we had Graham, and we have Alicia. Just wanted to thank them on behalf of the council for all the amazing work they have done with us over the years. I'm going to now pass this over to our co-chair, Bertie, who's going to introduce everyone, and then I'll speak a little bit at the end. So, Gunchish Miigwech.
Not quite as tall as the rest of the crowd. Gwe Nin Deluisi Birdie Lehman, the Newfoundland representative, Nin Deluisi El Mazdugwek Okdamgok, Newfoundland. I'm honored to be co-chair of the 2S LGBTQIA Plus Council, and as many of you know, there's a lot of issues facing 2S LGBTQIA Plus people, whether it's provinces rolling back our rights, or whether it's borrowing American-style politics and scapegoating us for any number of challenges. Those are not the things I want to talk about today, though we do need to be talking about them all of the time. What I want to talk about now is just introducing our council members and the positive work that has been happening. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce everyone. Our Nova Scotia representative, Muin Jij. For Quebec, Gassananawe Skydeer. BC, Orinescu. New Brunswick, Chief Alan Polchis. Nova Scotia, John Sillaboy. Saskatchewan, Kehu Gopher. PEI, Sherman Peters. And one of our outgoing representatives from Manitoba, he's been here for a number of years, but said this is his last meeting, Marcel Balfour. And we have a couple new incoming members, which I'm excited about as well. We'll give them a chance to quickly introduce themselves. Mallory Solomon, Ontario. And Clint Masson, Saskatchewan. Walio.
Hello, my name is Mallory Solomon, and my spirit name is Snow Covered Forest. I am from Constance Lake First Nation in Treaty 9 territory. I'm an Anishinaabe person who identifies as Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer. I currently serve as the Ontario representative on AFN's 2S Plus Council, where I hold the health portfolio. So over the past few months, I have had the opportunity to engage in important work at the national level. In February this year, I attended the AFN NIHB dialogue session in Vancouver, where myself and Alicia facilitated a session titled Mapping The Path, co-creating toolkits for gender-affirming care access. This session focused on identifying barriers and finding solutions to improve access to gender-affirming care for First Nations people. In April, I also attended the AFN Pandemic Preparedness Plan Workshop in Toronto, where I shared my lived experiences and perspectives to help inform future emergency preparedness planning for our communities. Miigwech for the opportunity to introduce myself and to share some of the work that I've done since December last year, and I look forward to continuing this work together in a good way. Miigwech.
Ani buju danse ga kyo yak niwagu magantek kitam skat din awal kapetuta ninsigasen. Hello, my friends, family. I introduced myself in Cree along with my spirit name in Cree, but my English name is Clinton Mason. I'm from the Onion Lake Cree Nation, Treaty 6 territory. I won't say too much, but I did want to mention small acts of recognition go a long way. So I encourage that nations open up those doors and begin recognizing our Two-Spirit relatives. And I also encourage that Two-Spirit community to step into those rooms and take up space. I'm proud to say, and I know many nations have already done this, but my home nation, Onion Lake, will be walking in the Pride flag for the first time at their Onion Lake Community Powwow celebrations this weekend. So I'm very proud for that. Also, that we began working on our Sacred Fire project, which the purpose is to reclaim Two-Spirit identity in First Nations communities. So I'm very proud about that as well. And I did want to acknowledge Kihio Preston, who is our primary for Saskatchewan. He could not be here, but there's still beautiful work to be done in Saskatchewan. Hi, hi.
Chief Miigwech, how to fit a year's worth of work into 5 minutes? Yeah. I want to talk about one of the big things, I guess, that we did. We do a lot, but one of the big things that we did is that we actually, with the support of the National Chief and the National Chief's office, we wrote a letter to Premier Smith when she had talked about using the notwithstanding clause to strip Two-Spirit and trans Albertans of their rights. And so the letter that we had wrote to, open letter that we wrote to Premier Smith was to remind her that Two-Spirit, we've been here before there was an Alberta, before there was a Canada, before there was this Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that the notwithstanding clause can't be used to strip us of our rights because we're protected under the Constitution under Section 35. Of course, Premier Smith never responded. But it was important for us to be able to stand up and to remind her and remind others of that. And that's why I think it's very important here with the AFN and with the chiefs in Assembly, when you established the Two-Spirit Council, was remembering that once again, the role that we've always played within our community. And it's an honor to be here today to help share that, be the peacemakers, the mediators, and to help lift everyone up, regardless of who you are, where you come from. I also wanted to thank our new staff who are working with us, with Jamie and with Peyton. It's welcome to our family. And we're also working with the other councils, that it's important work for the other councils that we need to start working more together to help AFN and to do their important work. And part of that is the Resolution 13, is that we need to fully get that fully implemented, not just for the staff, but for leadership as well, and also the organizational review. So there's a lot of important work that is being done and that continues to be done. And we thank, and just want to say thank all the council members of being such an amazing group of people. And I love Chief Pope with Chicky's toes, pedicured toes right now, so jealous. So thank you again, Atlinglen Chish, Chi Miigwech, merci beaucoup. and Yigua Juan, do your best. Thank you.
Thank you. I got to say something. You've got a beautiful speaking.
When I don't sound like a chain smoker.
I'm going to jump in here and apologize to my brother. You know how you save the best for last? I want to introduce Knowledge Keeper from BC as well, Simple Yon, Squamish, to eat. I now have to buy him dinner.
Thank you to the 2SL GTQQIA+ Council. We will now invite the National Youth Council up, as well as we have invited the youth representative of Wiki Unceded Territory and the Cree Nation of EU Itchy here to observe and connect as well. We'd really like to acknowledge the youth in the building. As the National Youth Council are not the only youth that are here. A lot of the times, as you can see, there are other councils, other youth from different provinces and regions that are in attendance as well. And I think it's very important to ensure that they feel welcome and safe in this space, as it is very intimidating coming into these spaces. You want to ensure that our youth feel protected and feel seen and feel included at every point in time. So please, if you see the youth throughout the next 3 days, please approach them, say hi, welcome them into the space, and ensure that they feel seen. I'll start with introducing myself. I am the co-chair, one of the co-chairs for the National Youth Council, alongside my other co-chair, Hannah, who will introduce herself after I spiel on a few things. I would also like to take a moment just to acknowledge our former co-chair, Isaiah Bernard. He was the co-chair for the past 2 years. He has done amazing work in the past 2 years, and I am grateful that I was able to spend the last year with him. Trying not to get emotional. He is very inspiring, and it was very nice to be able to stand there with him and watch him grow in the past 2 years. So I'd like to have a round of applause for him as well. So to get right into it, the Assembly of First Nation National Youth Council is a vital organ of the AFN. It's established under the AFN Charter, and the NYC is an advisory body to the AFN Chiefs Committees, the AFN Secretariat, and the AFN Executive Committee. The Council represents First Nations youth on issues that affect them and collaborates with leadership of all levels to influence AFN priorities and create opportunities for personal development and empowerment for future generations. We would like to acknowledge all of the Youth Council members that are present here today, and again, all the youth that are in the building. The NYC acknowledges and thanks all alternate and outgoing members whose terms conclude by July 2026. An overview of our year has been focused on attending the AFN assemblies, Chiefs Committee meetings, and meetings in our perspective portfolios. We would like to highlight on February 12, 2026, NYC co-chairs, myself and Isaiah Bernard, appeared before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs to speak in support of Bill S2, an act to amend the Indian Act. They emphasized that recognizing First Nations jurisdiction over citizenship extends beyond legislation changes and requires a co-developed framework. From February 24th to the 26th of 2026, 9 NYC members attended the AFN Education Forum Voices for Tomorrow, Lifting Our Nations Through Lifelong Learning, held in Vancouver, BC. We also did present at this forum as well, and the turnout was amazing to see, as we had, I think, most of the delegates there in our room listening to us in our presentation, so it was really nice to have that support at that time. I'll now turn it over to my other co-chair, Hannah Sewell. Oh, there. Where'd you leave it up? Sorry, I didn't
Hello, bonjour, anin norino sequen dijnakas magazadodem, abanjwanang nadonjaba, Anishinaabe Dao. My name is Hannah Sewell. I come from Batchewana First Nation. I'm a proud Anishinaabe, and I'm happy to be this year's other co-chair alongside Kiera Lebop. So I'm going to complete the final bit of our report and go off from where Kiera left us off. So back to the BC Education Forum. On February 25th, the National Youth Council presented an interactive workshop addressing various priorities and the unique needs of First Nations youth in education, language revitalization spaces, and exchanging lived experiences with participants. The next day, we did present a summary of our discussions from the interactive workshop to the main plenary, outlining recommendations and priorities to advance youth interests in both education and language revitalization spaces. Furthermore, in March 2nd and 3rd, NYC Saskatchewan Representative Serenity Gamble attended the AFN 2026 Economic and Infrastructure Summit in Montreal, Quebec. The summit brought together political, business, and finance leaders to build capacity to advance First Nations self-determination approaches to economic development. In December 2025, a big accomplishment was made by our former co-chair Isaiah Bernard, and he traveled to Frankfurt, Germany, alongside with 3 other First Nations youth delegates from across the country to accompany the sacred items on the flight back to Canada to ensure a safe, respectful, and culturally appropriate, aware, and return artifacts. Those artifacts were repatriated from the Vatican, and our youth were able to travel back with them. And I even would like to give a shout out for Katisha Paul, I believe, who's on stage with us. She welcomed those artifacts back with a beautiful song so that they could hear our voices finally again. And finally, on March 10th, National Youth Council members Isaiah Bernard, Kiera Lebob, myself, and Paya Lacasse attended the artifact unveiling event at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. The National Youth Council members assisted in the safe handling of the artifacts and offered prayers for the items and their safe return to their rightful nations. And one of the final events of the year that we had is myself. I had the privilege to attend the United Nations for the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples Issues in the week of April 20th. I'm the Ontario representative, as I mentioned, for AFN, and I was there to represent AFN. And this year's theme was ensuring Indigenous peoples' health, including the context of conflict, which I feel is a very appropriate title for the part of the world that we're in today. So the presence of the National Youth Council representative ensured that First Nations youth voices were heard and reflected at an international scale. I was also joined by other members from an Ontario delegation, Okinawa and Voices of the Land from the Cataquapit cousins that come from Attawapiskat. So they were also there to provide a lot of context around mining bills and the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario. So I was very happy to have a youth delegation there to really represent the voices in Ontario. And finally, our path ahead and looking forward. So in 2026 and 2027, the National Youth Council has the following priorities: to strengthen collaboration with the National Congress of American Indians, the NCIA, support key developments such as UNDA and Bill S2, and enhance National Youth Council's internal operations. So overall, that is our final comments from our overall year-end report. We really appreciate your time today. And as the future leaders of today and tomorrow, we really hope that you can not only consider, but involve youth in all of the initiatives you have ongoing in your communities, no matter what portfolio or capacity that may be in. We are here and we are ready to work, as you can see. So we've rallied all these youth from Wakemakong. They've come a long way to be here, and as well as the Cree Youth Council. I'd also like to give a shout out because on stage we do have 2 co-chairs from the Cree Youth Council, and we also do have a special guest, Mandy Galmasty's daughter. So I'd like to give a warm welcome of applause to everyone that's up here and just kind of make them feel comfortable. I
would just like to add as well, going back to the Vatican, that Payal Assis also was there. We can't forget him. He's... Sorry, it was mentioned. I just missed it. That was my bad. Thank you to you all. Yeah. We'll just give it a minute until the youth make their way off the stage, and then we will invite the Women's Council up to provide their report. So we will go to resolutions after the women's report. And I would also like to note that we have a lost and found, and that is room 202. 202. There has been a cell phone turned in there, and an elder is missing a black cane. So if you see that, please bring it to room 202. Thank you.
Everyone, we have our future leaders leaving the stage, and I think we're going to be in good hands. What do you say?
Just down the middle.
And now we will invite the Women's Council Chair, Brenda Vanguard, to provide the report.
Nigan katamskat na kakyo hogamawak nigan iwak keteyak squawak napewak guaya national chief and regional chiefs. My name is Brenda Vanguard, and I'm the Alberta rep in the Women's Council. I want to acknowledge the elders and the drum group for opening and blessing this place this morning. It started in a good way. I am pleased to announce that I took the role as chairperson when I was elected in December during the Chiefs Assembly in 2025. On Monday, the Women's Council had an election, and they elected Vice Chair from Northwest Territory, Brenda Gauthier. She's right there. And she's from the Northwest Territory region. We would like to thank Grand Chief Anna Betty for serving as co-chair for the past three years. We'd like to thank her for her services and leadership. I would also like to thank the women who participated in the Women's Council for their dedication and leadership during the many years in the Women's Council. Now I would like to give the women a chance to come up to the mic and introduce themselves. Starting with her.
Hello everyone, I'm Brenda Gauthier. I am from the Northwest Territories.
My name is Anna Betty Yachni-Benashkim, and I serve as a Deputy Grand Chief for Anishinaabe Nation, and I serve as the Ontario representative on this council.
Gwe, Joanne Miles from the Flat Bay Band. I'm representing Newfoundland.
My name is Tisha O'Rourke. I am from the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. I'm a district chief and I represent the Quebec region. Nyawa.
Isabel Lopez de Nigadagon, de Guanchit. I'm a spokesperson for a Women Council for AFN. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Connie Big Eagle from Saskatchewan.
Chief Betsy Kennedy, War Lake First Nation, representing Manitoba, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to see you all here. My name is Cheryl Rule, and I represent BC.
Good afternoon. My name is Penny Polches. I'm from the East Coast, the beautiful Atlantic. I am Willistic and I'm here representing the New Brunswick. So thank you for this opportunity.
The ones missing, I think there's 3 provinces, Yukon, Carlissa Way, Manitoba, no. Nova Scotia, Deanne Sack, and PEI Madeline, what's her? Shark? Those are the 3 missing. So right now I'd like to introduce the current sitting chief. I'd like to ask Joanne Miles from Flat Bay, Nova Scotia, to share the work that the council has been working on the past year. So if I'd like to share the mic with her.
And it's from Newfoundland. Thank you, everyone. With respect to the national inquiry into missing murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited people, we continue to push forward with implementing the 231 calls for justice. In November, we contributed to the writing brief to the Standing Committee on the Status of Women in their studies on Section 810 of the Criminal Code and in women's safety, including advocating for the strengthening peace bonds providing and leveraging specialized courts and those training to assess domestic violence and related criteria. Last year, we also advised on the AFN's participation at the Indigenous Federal Provincial Territorial meetings on the status of women held in the Yellowknife. Another highlight for the year was the Women's Council's participating in the AFN's First Nations Women's Economic Empowerment Infrastructure Training Sessions held March 2026. This session supported leadership, development and infrastructure, planning, financing and delivery, building our priorities to build capacity and support memberships among women leaderships. Members of the Women's Council also participated in a fireside chat hosted by National Chief and Indigenous Service Minister Mandy Kopas to discuss First Nations women's priorities. Looking ahead, we will support and prepare for the First Nations First Ministers meeting, recommending priorities for the table from the First Nations women's perspectives. And as matriarchs of our regions, we look forward in participating in person. Women's safety and inclusion remains a priority. We will continue to monitor legislative development that directly impacts them, like Bill S-228, an act to amend the Criminal Code. We will also monitor and advocate for women's involvement in spaces for economic development, resource extraction, as we know these projects are often linked to violence against women and girls. Our 2025 calls for justice progress report told us this clearly. Finally, we continue to call for justice for our loved ones, better tools to support the healing of our family and loved ones, our real actions by all levels of government, and to end the violence against women, girls, and gender-diverse people. Thank you for giving us this time to update the Assembly on the important work led by the Assembly of First Nations Women's Council.
Thank you to the Women's Council for that, and thank you to all councils for providing your reports today. It is great to hear all the important work that is being done throughout the year. We are going to move on. We are going to move on to resolutions now, so I'm going to hand it over to my co-chair, Adam.
Miigwech, thank you very much. So, Chiefs, proxy representatives, it is 4:37. Next is resolutions. So we'd like to get through as many resolutions as we can. It may only be one, but we will get started on resolutions. Next resolution we will be dealing with is emergency resolution number 2. It is in the packages. If you check online and also in your kits, there may have been some updates or changes or amendments to the resolution, but it is there for you. So I'm going to get right into it. Draft resolution number 2, if I can have Encore put it up on my screen and also up on the screen in the room here. Again, it's titled Reject Efforts to Control First Nations Histories and Undermine Rights Recognition. The mover is Chief Eugene Hart. Chief Hart, are you in the room? He is here? Okay, thank you. If you can please stand by. Seconded by Chief Patricia Andrew. Chief Andrew, are you here? Chief Patricia Andrew? Okay, thank you. Mover and seconder are here. So the resolution is up on the screen. I'll get Encore if you can scroll down to therefore be it resolved. There it is. So the resolution reads, therefore be it resolved that the First Nations in Assembly, number 1, support Innu Nation in denouncing and rejecting the government of Newfoundland and Labrador's reliance on a discredited and unscientific theory of Innu presence in Labrador. Number 2, direct the Assembly of First Nations, AFN, to demand clear statements from the Government of Canada and all provincial governments condemning political interference in public institutions where such interference denies, distorts, or minimizes First Nations histories, cultures, cultural belongings, identities, or rights. Number 3, direct the AFN to call on the governments of Canada, provinces and territories engaged in treaty negotiations to adopt policies that require negotiations to proceed on the basis of recognition of rights and prohibit governments from denying or undermining First Nation rights while negotiations are ongoing. 4, direct the AFN with the support of the National Chief to support any First Nation that seeks to protect, repatriate, interpret, or present their history, oral traditions, or cultural belonging free from government interference or distortion. Number 5, direct the AFN to support Innu Nation's demands for the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador to A, follow the Government of Canada and publicly confirm that the Innu of Labrador are Section 35 rights holders in the province, and B, instruct all departments to stop taking the position and stop promoting a discredited theory that Innu have only been in Labrador for 300 years. And we do have the mover and the seconder at microphone number 1. I'll start with the mover. Mover, microphone 1, please.
Chief Hart from Sheshatshiu First Nations. I'd like to welcome you guys for accepting our emergency resolution and taking the time to accept us to be here today with my community members, Sheshatshiu and Natwashish and Quebec Innu behind me. I've been the chief now for the last 13 years of Sheshatshiu First Nations, and I'd like to acknowledge Jody on my left here, and Mrs. Panashwe, Dr. Panashwe, both from our community. First of all, I'll start off, I'm very disappointed and hurt by the province when we had a meeting with him there a few weeks ago in Happy Valley Goose Bay. We were actually bringing back items that's in Ottawa, that's in all over the place, that belongs to the Innu of Labrador. So we were hoping to open this up. The exhibit was opened up in this museum in Northwest River to show to our people and our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, where our history comes from, because we haven't had that in our community for, like, we have about 800 artifacts or more in Ottawa that belong in Labrador, but we don't have a museum to bring it back home. So this was our opportunity for Jody and her staff that worked on this forever, and with her timeline, where we come from. And we were disheartened to hear that the government, the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, did not recognize our timeline. And they only recognize us 300 years. And I think that's very disrespectful towards us as leaders and our elders for both communities and every community. You don't say that if you don't have the facts to put that out in public. And also, a part of this museum artifacts that were back, I'd like to take the time to send my condolences to the Nui family in Natwashish. We lost an elder that was 92 that they buried this week in Natwashish. Very respected elder and the last drummer we have in our culture. And I said to the Premier that day we met the Premier, I said, there's an elder and those artifacts that's displayed in Northwest River, his late wife made those traditional clothes that's in display. So then we canceled the whole thing. And her Joachim Nui, a late elder, I told his sons about it and his daughter, and they were excited over it, but they never had time. Everything went downhill. So none of them had the chance to come view it in Northwest River the way it's displayed like a proper museum.
30 seconds.
So I think that's very disheartening to disrespect the family and the community members of both communities. So I don't really know. I'm still numb by it for what happened there a few weeks ago. And for us to be recognized for 300 years, it's like reconciliation works both ways. So I'm confused as a leader myself, where does reconciliation stand, you know? And it's very important to be heard here today, and we want your support because I don't think that was right for the province to say that to us and to our people, which were here many, many thousands and thousands of years. Like we had elders passed away that's 103. And that's not right for, like Memorial University recognizes us. They recognize our position we're in, and a lot of archaeologists recognizes us, and the person that's gone against this got his thesis from Innu. So that's it's slap in the face basically at the end of the day. And to tell Jody, you bring this back to your people, that it's not going to be open because of your timeline. Like Jody said, I can't do that. So I'd like to take the time to thank everybody that's here today. And I know we're all tired because we were traveled from Labrador. And but to take the opportunity to thank everybody that's here today. And we really need your support where we stand, because we're not 300 years old. We're more than 300 years old. So I'm going to get my elder to speak.
What I'll do, Chief Hart, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to the seconder, Chief Patricia Andrew, and she has that ability to allocate your time to the elder as well. Microphone number 1.
Okay. Hello, my name is Patricia Andrew, Michelle Innu First Nation, and I second the motion. And I want to give the elder time to speak. Thank you.
Ego childmo esi hu childmo nistam tam to no pura pustatino stemije to en ino po pomenot na esi hu pota bo do childmo esi hu.
She's saying the Premier is saying 300 years. We don't accept what he's saying, 300 years.
E kata ta kui no ne te pe shashi. Ta ne pochi tanana ben ino tau ino. Egu putati no esi. Kata ta kui no ta ne pochi tanana ben tanano.
And she said also, if he's saying 300 years, how did we exist? Back then we did exist. We wouldn't be here.
Mr. Mijeta, tam tu noipon, no atenani nani no esprisne metat, no atenin. Esprisne metat in non degets no metal. E windshield mo, puata no, puata, no atenani na.
And she said the province didn't see what we've seen years ago, what they've witnessed years ago. They don't see that. They see it, but the province don't see it.
Gene me gaisje schot muimit, gaisje schot muimit ni gaisnan, betayan skat, no mosom, no kom. Es no gaisje schot maguiat. No kunen tenanan, no pasto donan. No seminan, which means you go want that. Me am Chichiga see sweat was tante way to Tiano. Just send them the way to that was. And when I watch what the Mujit, Je Dossim Nantan Scutabanan. Chichikuno and tak in no Haitian youth.
And she said, what they learned from our ancestors and their parents and their grandparents, and they want to leave that legacy behind so that the children don't ask where they come from. Like it's still going strong, the culture.
And when they wait me to stand the mat, that to scat in an HG, Scott Mujit and Dossimnan. Kinda Scutabanan. Chichigo one that, and the way to that in no. A woman to stand in any, and I see it, showed more. Each got a man and Dossim and Tayanska. Gain a mew, but was sitting no ice to end that. No, them de Mr. Stentum, he no, then I see when showed more.
And she said they still want to teach the kids what the province has said to us is very disheartening. And she's hurt herself by the words that they used. And she said, it's not only me, she said there's probably a lot more people that they hurt by saying that to them. But she said they want to keep the traditional alive and continue our traditions moving forward.
It was Syrian, Shashish. It was Syrian. Mr. Mijit, and not Makonajet. I put you in a go and just see thought. It was what Shashish would that in no. It was but no Jimmy. And to it, it's got a matter to ask him. Mijit, chain wouldn't see thought they was Syrian.
She said back in her younger days, she remembers the elders that she went, when they're at the same time when everybody was going into the country, she remembers so many faces, but she can't say all the names, but she said there was a lot back then that would go in the country when she was a young girl.
Give me on man, man. It's Mr. Stenman, that wouldn't show them. Ino utasino, Mr. Buen Marino. Just pretend Mavenino. Just pretend Maven was, and Scott was the just pretend Maven. The general strength in an a total meat showed more. In no James the Buen man. Showed more just pretend Mavenino. Give was such just pretend Maven. Uchi one of these good money to us. And when they wait, Esko in New York, Happy Jesus wrote, she not anyway. And when West Mr. Squished mat, in the get the man and was it. She just gonna money, she told me no anyway. Gay no,
also, she mentioned how the province disrespected the Innu, especially the elders and the youth. Like she said, when they're no longer here, They want to leave that legacy with the younger generation to continue this. But at the moment, the government of province of Newfoundland Labrador has disrespected us as Innu. And she's very hurt by that.
Аз ми идеше едно на пот, ке го умножит. Го чешко е ни удите, беше изсъжот. Ма дени, або сен манчиш беше стаян. Ничко тъма ушунан, шишка уантик инно. Ке чешко източе удмо. Но източе удмо, ето то ми. Ке уино асет. Катаят, че изошко изтадият, че чуят мненият, васът, че кауан тиги но кайшният.
Like she said, there's not very many elders same age as her in our community that's still with us. But she said, we don't know how much time we have on this earth to represent for the community, but we want to represent as far as we can go and to be remembered. She said, thank you for taking the time to listen to her, but she said she knows that the time is very limited, and she wants to thank everybody. And I want to thank everybody that's here today as well, all the people, people from everywhere across Canada, and hopefully we'll hear positive news. Thank you, and thank you for helping us to get here today. And I don't know if Jody wants to speak.
Thank you very much. What I will do now is, another chief. What I just before, so we do have another chief that I'll go to first. Mover and seconder have spoken. Thank you so much for allowing your elder to speak. She reminds me of my great-grandmother, and I can't remember her name, her English name, but in our language it was Ajajamu. She lived to be over 100 years old, and that's Elizabeth. Okay, she reminds me of my great-grandmother, Ajajamu. Also, I'm really surprised that I understand a few words. I'm and then Chinil language from Northern Ontario and into Manitoba. I could understand Awat Ndawas Shimag and Dan Kudabanak, our children and our great-grandchildren. So, miigwech. I like to think that we are in support, and I do see many chiefs and delegates at the microphone. I like to think that we are all in support. So very soon I will ask if we have consensus, to proceed to and approve the resolution. But I will go to microphone 2 and then back to microphone 1. Microphone 2.
Thank you. My name is Chief Jenny Brake of Halibu Mi'kmaq First Nation in Newfoundland on the island portion of Newfoundland, and I want to offer my most sincere support to the chiefs and families of the Innu Nation. I'd also like to lift up Elder Elizabeth Panashaway. She has been our fiercest warrior in defense of our land and waters in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we've all learned so much from her, so I'm so honored to see you here today. The government of Newfoundland and Labrador and no other colonial government has the right to tell us who we are. And in Newfoundland and Labrador in particular, we have really struggled with our provincial governments on identifying with our timelines, our histories, and I want to stand in support. We stand with you. Halibu First Nation stands with the Innu Nation on this resolution, and we'll stand with you all the way. Thank you.
Microphone 1.
Chief Joanne Miles from the Flat Bay Band, Newfoundland. Our Big Mother Nation also stand with this resolution and with these people. Their fight is our fight, their struggles is our struggle. The colonial government, decided that they're going to take away some of their history, So, you know, we need to stand here. The rest of my time, I have decided to give to the elder.
Hi, I want to thank you for giving me this minute. I worked for the last 2 years developing Innu. It was a cultural exhibit dedicated to Innu history, and it was made in relation with elders, with community members, with youth. And we spent hours interpreting, working, picking items to bring back home for our youth. We're not represented in school curriculum. Our youth don't know who we are anymore. They know our reservations. They know Shahajit and Natwashish. They don't know our bigger history. And this was our way of showing the youth who we are, where we came from, and how our footprints have mapped Nasinan for thousands of years. And for one archaeologist to come and try and say with his theory that we've only been here for 300 years is unacceptable. And we hope that we can count on you today for your support. The government of Newfoundland and Labrador has been silent. There's been nothing for the last 3 weeks. We were supposed to open the exhibit on June 21, and it's in celebration of Indigenous Day, when our story was able to be presented and honored and shared. And we were told, no, you can't share your timeline. You've only been in Labrador for 300 years. That everything before Europeans came into Labrador is out the window, that don't count, is unexplainably devastating to the Innu people. And not having the elders be able to see the items that are sitting there ready for viewing, for us to be able to reconnect, to bring our children to learn about who we are, is an embarrassment that we have to come to Ottawa to ask for your help. It's embarrassing that a province has done this to Indigenous group, and we really hope that we can depend on your support. It's not just us. It's once it starts with us, it's going to go across, and they're going to start picking out all Indigenous groups across Canada to start erasing your culture and your history. So it starts with us, but it's going to and other places across Canada. So we want you to realize what is happening, that colonial archaeology is defining who we are, and our oral stories and our oral histories don't count, and that's not fair. That's not fair in this time of reconciliation, UNDRIP, and we have to sit here and beg for recognition when our stories, we know who we are. Thank you.
So at this point, I would like to ask the Assembly if we can make a decision. I believe the group, the delegation at the microphone, is all in support and there to stand with the mover and the seconder. So at this point, I'm going to ask, is there any, I'm going to call for question, is there any opposition? Is there any opposition to the resolution before you? Any opposition? I don't see any opposition or abstentions. I don't see any in the room. I don't see any online on Zoom. So therefore, we declare the resolution carried by consensus. So it is, I was hoping to do one more resolution. It's 5 o'clock. Assembly, are you interested in doing one more resolution or continue tomorrow? I see microphone number 2. Do you have your red lanyard? Okay, microphone 2.
Let's do one more. Let's do one more.
One more resolution?
Which one? I'll second it.
Okay, so the next resolution would actually be draft resolution 26. That's what we have next online. Okay, so there's a recommendation to proceed? 30? Okay, so I apologize. It's draft resolution 30. It's draft resolution 30 that is next. We'll go to the resolution right now. And Encore, if I can have draft resolution number 30 up on the screen, please. We have a couple of announcements after the resolutions. Of course, there is the session. National Chief has her evening session at 5:30. We are anticipating we'll be done by then. Also, resolutions start tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Reminder, 9 a.m. we'll start with resolutions. We need to determine quorum at 9 a.m. So we need everybody here before 9 a.m. So with that, resolution is up on the screen, and it is draft resolution number 30. It's titled The Reintroduction of First Nations Drinking Water Legislation. And it is moved by Chief Rod Gould Jr., who is present, seconded by Chief Lance Haymond, and I know Chief Haymond is right behind him. So the resolution is before you. Let's scroll down to therefore be it resolved. Again. So resolution reads, therefore be it resolved that the First Nations in Assembly 1, direct the Assembly of First Nations, AFN, to demand that the Government of Canada work with the AFN and First Nations to enact water legislation that finally meets the needs of First Nations by reaffirming the following critical elements. A, the human right to water, ensuring that First Nations have reliable access to a sufficient, adequate and safe quantity and quality of drinking water, and reliable access to effective treatment and disposal of wastewater as essential services. B, recognition of First Nations rights and jurisdiction over lands and waters, and the affirmation of the inherent rights and jurisdiction of First Nations in relation to water, source water, drinking water, wastewater, and related infrastructure on, in, and under First Nation lands. C, mandatory requirements for Canada to provide water and wastewater treatment that meets minimum national standards, or where requested the more stringent of the federal requirements or provincial standards governing residential water quality. D, providing long-term adequate and sustainable funding for water and wastewater for First Nations to address mandatory legislative requirements. E, address the systemic inequities in water services experienced by First Nations and achieve substantive equality with non-Indigenous communities. F, ensure liability protection for First Nations governments. And G, ensuring that the Government of Canada facilitates collaboration between First Nations and federal, provincial, territorial and municipal governments through transboundary source water protection planning and the entering of agreements to protect source water. Number 2, direct the AFN to demand that all governments respect and honor the inherent jurisdiction and treaty rights of First Nations to source water protection, supporting a source-to-tap multi-barrier approach. Number 3, direct the AFN to urge Canada to provide essential funding for First Nations as the rights holders to thoroughly review, analyze and provide feedback on the legislation through the parliamentary process. Number 4, direct the AFN to demand Canada fund and conduct, in collaboration with First Nations and AFN, a new national water and wastewater needs assessment to inform federal budget cycles and any new federal funding framework further to the new legislation. So that's number 4, and I believe that's it. Mover and seconder are here. I just want to remind you of the time, and so probably the more concise, the better. Microphone 2. Mover.
Yeah, well, thank you. Chief Junior Gould of the Ottawa First Nation, and I call question.
Thank you for that. I do see another chief at the questions have been called. I will go to the seconder, and then I will go to microphone 1. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Please approach now. I see no hands raised. So I will go to the seconder, and then I will close the speakers list after microphone 1. Seconder.
Chief Lance Heyman, Kebawek First Nation.
Thank you. Miigwech. Microphone 1.
Chief Kelsey Jackal, Cold Lake First Nation. This resolution should include protection of source water from its path off reserve. We heard this morning that many nations don't have water on their reserve lands at all. And most nations' water sources start far off reserve without the ability to protect upstream. Canadians' legislation is useless. Clarify Clause 2 to ensure that water comes into the communities in a good way. We'll leave the wording up to the resolution committee, but suggest that replacing the word source with headwaters might achieve this goal. Merci.
Merci. Miigwech. So I'm going to look to the resolutions team. Encore, if you can put the resolution up on the screen, also the screen that I'm looking at, just so that I can see the amendment. Resolutions team, did you get that?
Somebody's with.
Okay, we're just working on that right now. Oh, tonight, yeah. While we're waiting for the amendment, I don't have the specifics of tonight's event. Do you have it? I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. Very important event tonight.
Just like to make a reminder that there is the Chiefs welcoming reception from 5:30 to 8 p.m. tonight, and this will take place at the Starling Restaurant on 54 York Street in Ottawa.
Okay, very good. Miigwech Kiera. So that's coming up very shortly. Are we ready with the amendment on the screen? Not quite yet. Okay, it'll be in the therefore be resolved number 2, and it looks like National Chief is still here, so she's not going to start the session without you. Again, we have closed the speakers list. I did call for any other interventions, but we did close the speakers list. Thank you for respecting the process. I'm just waiting on word from the resolutions team. Okay, mover, microphone 2. Go ahead. Microphone 2, please.
Yeah, Chief Gould, we're acceptable to the friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. I don't have the actual wording yet, but I believe you have it. So,
yes.
And I'll just read it into the record here,
yep.
just for procedure. So it would be under, I'm not sure if I'm looking at the wrong screen, but I don't see any changes yet. Okay, we're still working on it. So reminder, 5:30, National Chief is inviting you to the special gathering this evening, Chiefs, and we just gave you the address. Also, once we get started tomorrow morning, we start right at 9 a.m. We'll get right into resolutions. Of course, the rules you've given us to follow is that when we call to order, we do a count in the room to see how many are present in the room and on Zoom, and then that's how we determine quorum for that day. So I really encourage chiefs, proxy representatives to come before 9 o'clock so that we can get started. Are we? Okay, so we're going to go to number 1B. 1B, so scroll down and further down. In the therefore be resolved, scroll down, down. There it is. Okay, yes, okay. Is that the only change? That might be the only change. So it would be of First Nations in relation to water, source water, including headwaters, comma, drinking water, wastewater, etc. You're okay with that? Okay. Who was the requester of the amendment? I lost you. That's what you were looking for? Okay, very good. Proposed amendment is on the floor. I'm going to call for question in the room and online. Any opposition? Any opposition to the resolution? Any opposition? Last call. Opposition? I see none. And so therefore, resolution is carried by consensus. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Kiera for some very important announcements.
So as we're coming to the end of our first day of this assembly, we've held really good discussions on very important topics, and thank you to everyone for your important contributions today. Before we wrap up, I'd like to run through a couple of reminders. Again, call to order will be at 9 a.m. tomorrow, which will determine quorum, so please be here for the count. Deadline for late resolutions is July 15th at 12 p.m. EST. And the Circle of Trade is located at Level 3, Canada Hall 3, and there will be a pipe ceremony tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. in this room. And with that, we will formally end today. I hope to see you all tomorrow. morning for our 9 a.m. start, and have a great evening.